more than a few minutes. I'm Dr. Susan Barnes. I'm the Senior Director for Educator Quality here at the Coordinating Board, and I'm thrilled to see all of you here. We are privileged to have the time today to meet with the two commissioners. One of the things that you as our clients have requested is that opportunity to have some face-to-face time for good discussion, and that is what this day's opportunity is for all of us. Bear with us if you don't mind. We would like to go around and have you introduce yourselves and let us know what institution you represent. I realize there are a number of us here, but I think it'd be very important for us to know and recognize who is with us. As I said, as the Commissioner said, we are broadcasting, so there are folks who are following this discussion who are not with us right now. So if you don't mind, we're going to kind of go to the left, go around the table, and then we'll come back this way. We'll try to be somewhat systematic about this. Yes, ma'am.
I'll pass this around.
All right, in the back area. All right. So, Dr. Gardner.
I'm David Gardner. I'm Deputy Commissioner for Academic Planning and Policy at the Board of Board.
I'm Doug Palmer. I'm the Dean of the College of Education at Texas A&M University College Station.
I'm Dean Minix, College of Liberal and Fine Arts at Tarleton.
I'm Art Hernandez. I'm the Dean of the College of Education at Texas A&M Corpus Christi.
I'm Jill Berg, Dean of the College of Education at Tarleton State University.
I'm Genevieve Brown, Dean of the College of Education at Sam Houston State University.
I'm Pam Jansma, Dean of the College of Science at the University of Texas at Arlington.
Beth Wright, Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at University of Texas at Arlington.
Jeannie Grillant, Dean of the College of Education and Health Professions, University of Texas at Arlington.
Jerry Thomas, Dean of the College of Education at University of North Texas.
Lisbeth Dixon Krause, Associate Dean for Teacher Education at the University of North Texas.
Bethel Gonzalez, Head of the School of Education at Texas A&M San Antonio.
Chuck Rook, Interim Dean, College of Education, Texas Tech.
I'm Lawrence Skuanek. I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Texas Tech University.
Steve Seidman, I'm Dean of the College of Science at Texas State University, San Marcos.
I'm Lois Hale. I'm Dean of the College of Education at the University of Texas of the Permian Basin.
I'm Mylon Mitford. I'm Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Texas of the Permian Basin.
Sherry Johnson, Head of Teacher Certification at UT Dallas.
John Miazga, Dean of the College of Education at Angelo State University.
Larry Rosso, Dean of Education and Human Development, University of Houston, Victoria.
Jill Fox, Chair of the Department of Teacher Leadership and New Literacies at UH Victoria.
I'm Bill White, Division Director for Arts and Sciences at Texas A&M Central Texas.
I'm Eddie Henderson, Dean of the College of Education and Social Sciences at West Texas A&M.
I'm Lucian Yates III, and I have the privilege of serving as the Dean of the Whitlow R. Green College of Education at Prairie View A&M University.
I'm Bob Wimpelberg, Dean of the College of Education at the University of Houston.
I'm Jean Shockey, Associate Dean, College of Arts and Sciences, University of North Texas.
Michael Montesino, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at UNT.
Juan Lira, Interim Dean of the College of Education at A&M International University in Laredo.
Jeff Kirk, I'm the Director of the Division of Education from Texas A&M Central Texas.
I'm James Pierce. I'm the Dean of the College of Science and Technology at Tarleton State University.
Kevin Lemoyne, Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Academic Affairs and Research here at the Coordinating Board.
And I'm McGregor Stevenson, Assistant Commissioner for Academic Affairs and Research at the Coordinating Board.
Judith Laredo, Assistant Commissioner, P16.
Robert Scott, Janitorial Services, TEA.
Raymond Paredes, Commissioner of Higher Education.
And I think I'll change direction. Since the microphone is over here, we'll pass the microphone down in that direction.
I'm Anne Marie Ellis, Dean of Liberal Arts at Texas State University.
I'm Judy Abbott, Dean of the College of Education at Stephen F. Austin State University.
Hi, Brenda Nichols, Dean of Arts and Sciences, Lamar University, Belmont, Texas. Hollis Lowry Moore, Dean of College of Education and Human Development, Lamar University.
Good afternoon. Jay Cummings, Dean of the College of Education, Texas Southern University.
Albert Reese, Interim Dean, College of Education and Human Performance at Texas A&M University, Kingsville.
Brent Mangus, Dean of the College of Education and Human Services at Texas A&M University in Commerce.
Joe Laser, University of Texas San Antonio, representing Dean of Science.
Howdy. Grady Price Blunt, Dean of the College of Sciences, Angelo State University.
Betty Merchant, Dean of the College of Education and Human Development, UT San Antonio.
You're not going to do it.
Karen Lumen, Deputy Associate Commissioner, TEA.
Janice Lopez, I'm Director of Educator Standards, TEA.
Joel Booker, Associate Commissioner for Educator and Student Policy Initiatives at the Texas Education Agency, and backup janitor.
Mike Hennessy, Dean-elect of the College of Liberal Arts at Texas State University, San Marcos.
Onimi Wilcox, Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Prairie View A&M University.
Cherry Ross Gooden, Chairperson of the Department of Curriculum and Instruction and the Premier College of Education at Texas Southern University.
James Johnson, Associate Dean, Academic Affairs, College of Education, Texas Southern University.
Jim Crack, Associate Dean, College of Education and Human Development, Texas A&M College Station.
Irma Harper, I'm Assistant Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs at the A&M System.
I'm Glenda Ballard, Dean of the College of Education and Liberal Arts at Texas A&M University, Texarkana.
Dorleen Hooten, Teacher Preparation and Certification, Texas A&M University, Central Texas.
Kelly Cood, Program Coordinator for the Department of Curriculum Instruction at Texas A&M University, Central Texas.
Good afternoon. Cheryl Santos, Dean, Division of Education and Human Services, University of North Texas at Dallas. UNT, Dallas. Okay. Thank you.
I'm Sherry Field, Associate Dean for Teacher Education at the University of Texas at Austin.
And I'm Stan Carpenter. I'm the Interim Dean of the College of Education at Texas State University, San Marcos. And I think that's it.
Well, thank you very much for coming and taking your time and your energy to come and spend some time with us. We think it's a very important meeting. Oh, sorry. We have another person.
I am Grant Simpson, Dean at St. Edward's University.
Thank you. Did we miss anyone else? Anyone else come in later? All right. Our plan now was to go ahead and invite you to share lunch if you can be headed in this direction. We'll have to be kind of careful. We have a significantly larger population than we had anticipated, so we apologize if there's any difficulty with the food situation, but we welcome you to go ahead. I know you're planning on having something to eat, and so we'd like to go ahead and take this time, let you go up, get some food, come back. Commissioners would then like, while you're starting to have your lunch, each of the commissioners would like to have an opening statement, and then we have a very brief set of presentations on the where we are on the agenda, part 2 and 3, relating to our accelerated plan for closing the gaps and some of the initiatives here at the agency. And then we would like to have a general discussion addressing the topics that we have shared with you. So that's the plan for the agenda for the day. Most of you have been in the board in this area and know that you'll now need to go out this door and down the hallway if you need the facilities. We are under construction, so you may find yourself in a dead end, but just make that adjustment. Any comments, questions, suggestions before we move forward?
Well, let me make a quick comment. First of all, we're extremely gratified that this many people showed up. We were saying, well, if we get 25 people, we'll be will be very pleased because of the timing of the meeting. So this is a very impressive turnout. If we run out of food, we'll make an emergency call to Jason's Deli down the street. We'll bring food in, and we'll make sure everybody's accommodated. And also, despite that not all of you can sit at the tables, we will have these portable mics so that everyone can fully participate in the discussion. So let's eat.
Has occurred one more time. So if you still would like things, there is food available, but we'd like to go ahead and move with our agenda if that's all right with you. But please continue eating. Dr. Scott, Mr. Scott, sorry. I'm so used to Dr. this and Dr. that. It is.
No, that's fine. And I would echo what Commissioner Paredes said in the opening, that we're very thankful for the turnout here today. It's great that you are all willing to come and sit around this table and interact with us, because I think that over the years, as I've been involved in public education, there's been a lot of finger pointing between public education and higher education about who the real culprit is in the lack of performance in some of our schools. And I'd kind of like to let's put it all on the table. Let's hash through it. Let's figure out where each has their deficiencies, and let's figure out systems to address them. I think that in public education, we have done some very significant things over the last decade or two. I think we have achieved significant gains through the development of our accountability system, and now we're in the process. We will release today a transition plan to an entirely new system that talks about untested subject areas and how we're going to better focus on fine arts and career and technology. That we focused so much on the 4x4 and the 4 core academic areas. We wanted an accountability system that also reflected the value we place on fine arts and career and tech. So we're moving in that direction in public education, and I think that's going to have a significant impact on what we expect from our educators and our workforce. I also think that the work that Dr. Paredes and I have done on college readiness standards sets a high bar for our students entering college, and I think is a long overdue shift in our expectations for students entering college. And I speak that not only as the Commissioner of Education, but as the father of 2 high school seniors this year who are desperately awaiting the results of their early decisions for college admission. So I think that, and as much as they gripe at me about 4x4 and the 4th year of math and science, I tell them it's the right thing. And I think it's benefited them. And I think they are far more prepared than I certainly ever was to enter the ranks of higher education. So I think that the work that we did there is very significant. How many of you all have heard of the movie or seen the movie Waiting for Superman? Most of you have all heard of it, probably all seen it. Where would you place Texas based on your view of that movie? Well, a rhetorical question. If you took that movie to mean that getting rid of teacher tenure and promoting charter schools would solve all your problems in public education, which is basically the underlying message. There's a lot said there, and it's a very compelling movie. But teacher tenure and charters seem to be the primary focus. Well, we don't have tenure in Texas. We have charters, some of which have unlimited authority to expand based on an amendment I gave them. Have we solved all of our problems? Absolutely not. It is far more complex. It is far more complicated than just those 2 issues, or even 3 issues or 4. And so I'm glad we can explore the nexus between how we improve student performance through both our public schools and increase the quality of our teaching workforce. There's an important nexus there, but there's also an important nexus with our parents, and we tend not to talk about that a lot, and the home lives our students endure before they come to school. And I think that we've done a lot, as I mentioned, accountability and college readiness. What we have not done, and I think we are on the verge of doing, is really exploring how to examine the effectiveness of our teaching workforce. Other states have gone about this in different ways. And I will tell you up front, I am not a fan of the black box. I do not believe in data in, data out, and make a decision only on one data point. I think there have to be multiple measures. I think they all have to be valid measures. And I think that you absolutely need the input of the education community before you move forward on that. And I think that the overall goal of the system ought to be to validate the good work that is going on in our schools and not necessarily to punish. In the end, we're going to find people who can't cut it in our schools, and they need to be shown the door. But that should not be the primary goal of that system. It should be a byproduct of it. It should be an end point that unfortunately happens if we fail to do our jobs as well as administrators. And then finally, I've talked about teacher education programs and how we can bring balance to the practical versus the theoretical in instruction in our colleges of ed. And last session, I felt it very important to get Senate Bill 174 passed that gives my agency some authority over alternative prep programs. And I think that we need to continue that work to make sure that all of our prep programs are producing the most qualified individuals to teach in our schools. And I know I've covered a lot of different ground. If there's, I mean, I could sit here and talk for hours, but I told Dr. Perez I'd at least give him time to get something down. So before I get in trouble for dragging on, I do again want to thank you all for being here. I'm open to anything you have to say. I'm open to suggestions and criticism, but I also hope that you will be as well, and you will be willing participants in how we move this forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. The genesis of this convening was a series of discussions I had with some superintendents going back all the way to last summer. And what I heard over and over again, and I know that there's often a difference between perception and reality, but all of you also know that perception sometimes is more important than reality. And I heard over and over again, why aren't you doing a better job of supervising the training of teachers? And that we get teachers coming into our schools who don't know how to teach phonics. We get teachers, one of the complaints I heard about a particular university in Texas was that their students had no ability, or had no training, I should say, in dealing with Latino kids. And I thought about that a lot, and I knew, for example, that this particular institution had a very strong Center for Mexican American Studies, and just out of curiosity, I called the dean of the School of Education at that institution and asked if there was any cooperation, if there was any work being done by the Center for Mexican American Studies. I don't know if it was called exactly that, and the School of Education. The answer was no. And they must have had 15 faculty in departments like English and Spanish, anthropology, sociology, history that could really helped the teachers in the School of Education become more effective in working with Latino children, and that wasn't going on, which is one of the reasons I'm gratified the deans of letters and science and arts and science and other academic disciplines are here. The other impetus to convene this meeting was the latest McKinsey study. I was very much influenced by the first McKinsey study that demonstrated why the United States was not faring as well, or at least argued why the United States was not faring as well in K-12 academic achievement compared to other high-achieving countries. Then the latest study that McKinsey did about attracting more students from the top third of the university classes into teaching was also compelling. That was one of the articles we sent all of you that I hope you had a chance to read. Finally, one of the things that made me think that this meeting could be useful is because we have a strong impetus in Texas to create more research universities, more so-called national research universities. Some of those institutions are represented around the table. And while I support that, I do think we need more research universities. I'm also concerned about the fact that the more prestigious a university is, the less likely it is to be interested in the School of Education and teacher education issues like that. I happen to be, I spent 30 years at UCLA, and that's obviously a top research university. I can tell you the School of Education was a stepchild in the overall academic structure of the institution. And I think that's fairly typical. I know the University of California well, and I know I'm on a board at Stanford, and I can tell you that producing teachers is not their number one priority. And I think we have to do something about that. I'm concerned about making sure that we prepare teachers to work in the classrooms that they actually will experience. I'm concerned that we make sure that teachers are working in ways that are aligned with our college and career readiness standards. I'm very concerned that we have a teaching force that can teach up to the levels of rigor that all of us are committed to. And I'm very concerned that we have to do something about developing teachers who can do something about the fact that we still, by most measures, even though we've seen some rather striking improvement over the past 9 or 10 years in Texas, according to ACT, for example, it's still the case that under 25% of high school graduates in Texas are college ready, and I think that, to a large extent, is a function of the kind of instruction and the kinds of expectations that we have for them, and those come to a large extent from teachers. So I think there is a lot to talk about. I think we need to have a frank discussion, and we need, by the end of the day, to come up with a course of action beyond this meeting. And what we will do is follow-up activities. And I want to address another one of the articles that you were sent that shows that there's a very significant disconnect between what faculty and schools of education are doing and what schools perceive they need from schools of education. So with that, I'll stop, and we should move ahead with the agenda.
Thank you very much. We have two very, very brief kind of background pieces we'd like to share with you. Right now, as you know, the board has adopted in last April an accelerated plan for closing the gaps by 2015. And every summer, there is a report made to the coordinating board that tracks our progress in certain areas. And I'd like to share with you just the 3 slides that relate to our teacher production numbers. Mary, if you could go to the first slide, please. This is the slide that indicates the trends for production of initial teacher certificates beginning in 2000 through the 2009. Essentially, we are down 2.4% from fiscal year 08, and we are 20%, nearly 21% below the trend line needed to meet the target by 2015. That, of course, is one of our top priorities. And Mary, let's go to the second slide. The second slide traces the routes that teachers are entering the profession with that initial certificate. And you'll note that in 2000, approximately 1 in 5 teachers were entering through the alternative route, and by 2009, 52% of our teachers are entering through the alternative route. Next slide, Mary, please. The last slide deals with math science teachers, and once again, we do have a drop of approximately 5% from last year, and we are significantly below the trend line that we need to have to make our target by 2015. Now, the board, when they adopted the accelerated plan in your packet, there, I think right behind your agenda, we won't go into this, but we did provide for you the excerpts from the accelerated Closing the Gaps plan that deal with the teacher certification piece. It's one of the 4 emphases that the board picked up because we are significantly behind in our target attainment there. I think an important, significant piece in what the board adopted in April is that in addition to the metric of looking at the number of initial certificates, the board added the important words teacher effectiveness. Those of us who work in that area know that's a very significant change in focus for the board, and it certainly affects the work that we do in our unit in how we work with you and all the educator preparation programs. Clearly, there is emphasis in the new plan on looking at ways to use our finance policy to try to incent more teachers, both in math and science and just in general. There's an emphasis on disseminating good practices, identifying good preparation practices and disseminating those, and trying to expand partnerships at all levels to support educator preparation. So that one-page excerpt, you're welcome to take that. It's a simple way to look at that piece of the plan, which is relatively, it's a larger document. Yes, Bob?
These 2 slides, Susan, with the target trend line and the production, is that production from colleges and universities only, or does that include alternative programs?
Since about 2005, I believe the trends have included all routes. Is that not correct? Yes. The original plan focused, as I understand it, on the production from IHEs. The board made it amended probably about 2004 or 5 and added the other routes. So these are initial certificates. That's correct. So, yes, ma'am?
Are you also tracking retention rates in the profession? Have you seen any changes in the last 2 years?
Actually, this is SBEC data provided to the coordinating board, so I would have to defer. Actually, the question was, is the coordinating board tracking retention rates? That's not one of the metrics in our particular plan, but SBEC is tracking retention. Anything else? I'm not sure of what you do. All right. That's all I would like to question.
Up.
I'm sorry, where? Oh, Jarrell?
We try to come to our clean data, and it hasn't changed very much at all. The number barely moved at all. We think that it has, but it hasn't. It hasn't
changed. Okay. Any other? Yes, Art?
Clarification. When you say the numbers haven't moved, what are you talking about? The retention rate for teachers.
Thank you. Profession.
Yes, that's correct. Her question was in the profession, and that is correct. That's what SBEC tracks. All right. Any other questions on that? That's just a summary of the data that's available to us at this point and reported to our board. We'd also like to, in response to what this agency is doing to try to support and meet those targets, Dr. Araceli Ortiz, who's with the Educator Quality Unit, is going to highlight very quickly some of the initiatives that, in fact, some of you participate in, and we appreciate your participation in our initiatives to better serve teachers and the faculty who work with them. Araceli?
Thank you. Can you all see me here? I think I'm going to work with this microphone. I want to take just maybe 10 minutes or less to go through some of the major initiatives that we manage in our division, which is the P16 Initiatives Division, Educator Quality. These are the 4 major initiatives that I want to mention today, and all of the information that I'm going to show you is available on our website, and you can certainly contact me if you would like any other details. I'm going to talk about the College and Career Readiness Initiative Faculty Collaboratives. Those are known as the Faculty Collaboratives, FC. I will also talk about the Math, Science, and Technology Teacher Preparation Academies, MSTTPA. I will talk about the educator preparation demonstration sites, and finally the federal program that we manage through our group called the Teacher Quality Grants. The first one is the Texas Faculty Collaboratives. I'm not going to read all of the information, rather I will explain what this is about. This initiative focuses on preparing and sending information to the faculty in both the educator preparation programs as well as in the colleges of arts and sciences. Basically, we want to affect any faculty that are in some way related to the preparation of teachers. So we want to provide them the latest information, we want to provide them professional development, and we also want to provide them resources regarding the implementation of the college and career readiness standards. So rather than just saying, here are the standards, and they will be implemented and integrated into the TEKS at the public education level, we want them to be aware of what these are and to begin to teach their candidate teachers so that when those teachers are graduating, they will go into a school system already aware and prepared as to how to teach these. We've organized this effort by asking a university that you see here to take the lead on each one of these content areas. The University of Texas at Austin leads the English Language Arts Faculty Collaborative. The Texas State University leads the Mathematics Collaborative. Texas A&M University in Corpus Christi leads the Science Collaborative, and the University of Texas at Arlington leads in Social Studies. The kinds of work that is being done by these collaboratives varies, and we're into our second, almost into our third year now. They're funded through House Bill 1, and they're going to continue their work through 2012. This board has approved that continuation of work. Up to now, approximately 1,200 faculty have been served at events at both small and large. They have begun to compile a substantial portfolio of resource products. One of the things that we made sure is that we wanted to make sure that this was not a one-time event participation, rather that there was a lasting effect, some way to sustain this effort and to roll it out to even more faculty. So there is a website that is very nicely populated now with a lot of these resources. It's listed there. It's txfacultycollaboratives.com, and there you will find all of the events. At this point, we have too many to keep even our own calendars participating in all of them because they're happening throughout the state. Many events happening, collection of video excerpts from the various symposia, collection of PowerPoint presentations featuring highlights of teacher ed best practices, and also analyses documents as to suggested methods to improve teacher preparation programs. We have gotten very positive evaluation data from both the faculty that have participated, from the administrators, and from external evaluators. So I invite you to make sure that your faculty is involved in these events. Again, they are across the 4 content areas, but they also make a very concerted effort to work on cross-discipline standards. So many of them work together, such as literacy in the social studies, mathematics and science integrated, and how to get students to think about both. So that's Texas Faculty Collaboratives. The next program is called the Math, Science, and Technology Teacher Preparation Academies. And this began as a program to fund the preparation of more and better qualified teachers in the fields of math, science, or technology. At this point, since we've been managing this program for the last couple of years now, we have created or helped to coordinate, rather, a statewide network of academies. We have 18 academies currently in operation, and these are hosted by 15 institutions of higher education. You'll see that there are 2 or 3 that have multiple academies. One may be in the mathematics department, for example, at UT Arlington. We have a mathematics focus academy as well as a science-focused academy. The goal of these academies are 3. To support in achieving higher levels of teacher certification in math, science, and technology, to support in achieving higher levels of teachers completing a master's degree in each of the fields, and thirdly, to support these teachers in achieving a certified master teacher status. So these are the three very distinct allowable goals that we try to serve based to the law that funds this program. And the progress has been very, very good. We're pleased. These universities have managed to not only meet the needs of these teachers, but they've also effected some changes in their programs. They've created a better liaison with departments from education and math and science. They've created other and more flexible master's degree programs. They have offered advanced coursework that now integrates the CCRS as both an awareness and a modeling of how you would teach this with that standard in mind. They have developed seminars focused on instruction, and they've also offered opportunities for mentoring and early field experiences for these teachers. So we just finished a review of the 18 academies, and all of them had many words of high praise as far as what they've been able to accomplish. So while the bulk of the funds goes to pay for the tuition for these master's degrees or these master's certification, they've also managed to get a lot of intangibles, such as this cooperation between their school districts in the area and also between departments. We've currently served about 1,100 in-service and pre-service teachers with this program. The next program is called Design and Pilot of Tools for CCRS, and we basically call this the Educator EdPrep Demo Sites. This is a little bit different of an effort. This effort has more of a research flavor to it, in that in the other two we're implementing programs to serve immediately. In this case, we competed for 2 universities to propose leading this effort, and we have Texas A&M at College Station, as well as Stephen F. Austin working on this project with us. And what they are doing is they are gathering research directly from focus groups. So they are out working with teachers, they're working with administrators. As you can see there in that diagram, the idea is that this preparation of teachers isn't really just in one box. It's not just in the IHE, but rather it's this network that involves the community colleges that feed participants or candidates into the program, the school districts, the high schools, and certainly the teachers and the students in those high schools. So we've begun to work with them, and we've asked them to help us develop and try developing tools that once they are tested here, they can provide to another university or teacher preparation site to say, are we ready to prepare teachers with this level of cooperation and with this focus of CCRS. We just had a report from them, again, very, very positive. A lot more work. They're doing a lot more work than we imagined, because they really are going way out there, and they're creating both a lot of resources as well as gathering research. So we're very pleased with them. I think I have one more slide with them. Yes, so they're going to deliver at the end of the summer is when we'll have this feedback, but they're going to deliver to us an educator preparation framework suggestion. Okay, this is what it would take to prepare teachers well to teach with these standards and to that level of quality. They're going to deliver a pilot self-assessment tool that would allow the evaluation of quality and effectiveness of educator preparation. They're going to talk to us about feedback from this preliminary network of partners that they have been working with, and also they're creating some very, very interesting video case studies of the teachers in action, teachers commenting, administrators commenting, just a lot of very nice material that we think we'll be able to use and share with many of you, or any of you that are interested. So that's the EdPrep demo site. And then finally, we have the Teacher Quality Grants Program. Again, this is a federally funded effort, and it provides grants to higher education institutions, again, with the same goal and focus on math and science. And right now, this program is organized. I think it's every 2 years there's an opportunity to apply and to go through the grant process. Many faculty are involved with this. I believe we have over 40 universities or grants out at the different universities participating in this. And we've also created kind of a network where just recently in September we had a conference. TEA was there, we were there, and then all of these major initiatives in math and science throughout the state. We got everybody together for one day, and we probably had about 200-300 people out talking about all of their programs and how they can leverage. And that's the key thing. In a small department, we know how to leverage, and we've leveraged by asking our universities to be our partners in getting and doing this work. And so in the same way, they're looking at each other. Holders of teacher quality grants, how can they work with the academies? How can they work with the faculty collaboratives? So in general, those are the 4 programs. And again, all of this information is on our website, and you can certainly contact us for any further details.
Any questions?
Comment. This is a wonderful set of activities. We know that our soft underbelly is that we don't have research on student outcomes that relate to what we do. I mean, that's somebody once said the federal government in health spends, I don't know, a significant amount of every federal dollar on research. The federal government in education has spent historically minuscule amount. So my only comment would be, is it possible to take these programs? What we have here is a lot of promising activity. We have networks and infrastructure. When we talk about hundreds of people taking part, the scale we need to move to obviously is thousands. And would there be in somebody's budget and somebody's interest a state-level effort to do the hard research and begin, now's the time when we need to start tracking the data. That's my question. How can we get to outcome? What we have here, I think, are very promising output data, but we don't have outcome data.
If I could respond to that, I think it's a very timely question, and as I mentioned earlier, that we were on the cusp of developing a teacher effectiveness metric. That will include, in this development of this overall student data system that we are putting together right now with grants from the U.S. Department of Education and the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, is probably the most comprehensive student data resource information system in the country. And the Holy Grail has always been, we need this teacher-student link. Well, the other part of the Holy Grail was the teacher-student teacher prep program link, and we'll have all 3. We'll have all 3 components, so we'll be able to actually start to track the data, to do the research that you mentioned, because we've lacked that ability to track outcomes. And so I think the work that we have, the foundation that we have laid between the 2 agencies will help us solve that problem in the very near future.
I just asked David Gardner if we could put that in our accountability system for higher education. He said, yes, if we can, once all the 3 components are actually linked, we'll do it.
Yeah. And the whole system, we're going to be making incremental gains over the next couple of years. The whole system will be in place by 2014. So we're well on our way, and it's a pretty momentous undertaking. And I would ask at some point, maybe if we reconvene this group, that we have staff come and demo the system to you, because I think you'll be pretty impressed with the level of detail that we're going into, delving down to the student level, classroom level, campus level, and program level, so that we can see, what are you spending your dollars on, and what success are you getting for it.
If I could add very quickly, one piece that will complement what the Commissioner was talking about is that the pathway projects that we have implemented in Bexar County, Houston, El Paso, one starting in South Texas, where we're getting faculty from ISDs, community colleges, and universities together, and we have data on actually student performance that those schools through MOUs are agreeing to share, and it's being put in our data system on our servers, along with the TEA data we have, is allowing those districts to sit and make decisions at a local level. And we expect that's going to expand. And so when you have what the Commissioner was talking about, along with this additional empowerment, which will be even more so, I think, for the Dell dollars, there'll be a lot of ability at the local level to identify. And we know that in Houston and in Bexar County, that school districts have actually discovered, when they've looked at the performance of their students in college and linked that to actual classrooms in their districts, they have made changes in terms of realizing they weren't actually teaching Algebra 2 and Algebra 2, for example, that certain teachers weren't performing at the same level, and they've made that decision themselves based on the data. So there's a lot going on right now.
And I would ask you to start thinking about what type of data would be helpful to you, and how would you use that to make decisions. And so as we develop the system, we can incorporate that functionality into it, because we want to be a provider of information for you so that you can make better decisions in your programs.
And I think it's two things. One is I very much support and endorse and appreciate that. I think we would welcome an opportunity to be able to provide input, because it's not just the variables that are being assessed, but the metrics that are being used to assess those variables. Then the ability to employ different analytical approaches depends on the nature of the data, not just what the data are supposed to be representing. The other thing I'd like to ask or suggest is that if we're interested in teacher quality, that this data system be connected to, in a very real way, all providers of educators, regardless of where they might come from. So it's going to be important that it's not only higher ed, but it's alternative certification. It's everywhere.
Absolutely.
I don't believe that anyone here is would argue against alternative routes to certification. I think all of us share a common commitment to the quality of the education of educators as a profession. And from that perspective, we're very concerned about making sure that all of us equally are able to meet the bar wherever that might be set.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Having been a proponent of alternative paths to certification, I have met with some resistance from colleges of education and the deans in the past, so it's refreshing to hear you say that.
As the first takeaway from this meeting, could I ask how many of you would like to see a demonstration of the capability that Robert just spoke about? Okay, so I think we'll do it.
It's actually interesting. We're demoing it around the country, and Lori Fye with the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, I was just in Washington, D.C. the last couple of days, and we had lunch, and she tells me that she goes around to these other states, and they're blown away by it, because nobody's, supposedly Florida had the best system. We're gonna beat that. So that's our goal.
We need you to get a portable mic.
The amount of time and effort putting teachers under scrutiny with data collection, I'm sure that there are similar examples that we can draw on from medical profession, perhaps accountability for lawyers that we could look to. Should we reinvent the wheel, or is the wheel only running over educators?
Well, in our world, our job is not to run over educators, but to evaluate them and hold them accountable. As I said earlier, I'm not a fan of a single source black box metric to make high-stakes decisions about teacher terminations, teacher dismissals, because as a lawyer, I know that notice and due process are rights under the common law that you just can't simply throw out the window. Any of you who have dealt with the contract termination of an employee on public service know the same thing. So when I say multiple measures, I mean that, yes, they all have to be objective, transparent, and fair, but there are also some interesting things that you can find talking to teachers who are the best, Teachers of the Year, Milken Award winners. Their ability to self-evaluate is so important for them, and to be evaluated by their peers. And they might gain as much or more out of that than just the data. And I want to address the issue of data fatigue. Part of the goal of this new data system is to eliminate districts from having to submit the data over and over and over again. Oh, well, we just started a new grant program. We need you to submit this data. Well, we just submitted that data last week. So once the system gets the data, it will pre-populate a form for a new grant program with data that we already have. So we're trying to minimize the demands on our teachers in the classroom and demands on our administrators for having to keep putting data in the system over and over and over.
I can say I saw an early demonstration, and it's actually better than it sounds. Yeah. It is very good.
Could I make a comment about the elephant in the room, which is the alternative program versus Deans of Education? I think, well, I'll tell the story. One thing that concerns me and often frosts my cupcake is a reference to poor quality teaching and then a second reference to colleges of education only. This happened in the Greater Houston Partnership Education and Workforce Committee, and everybody looked at me when the comment was made. And I said, I wonder how many people in this room realize that more than 50% of our teachers come from sources other than colleges of education. I think we know there's probably as much variability within as between, number one. But number two, I think we would just ask that as we talk about this issue publicly, we not leave it at the doorstep of colleges of education only to improve the quality of teachers, just in our rhetoric, purely in our rhetoric.
That is an absolute fair statement. And as you'll notice, when I said teacher-student link, I said prep program. And I said prep program for a reason, because you're exactly right. More than 50%, it's actually closer to 55, I think 56% come through those alternative pathways. So when we say colleges of education are the problem, it's the wrong terminology. You know, it may be the prep program, and as I mentioned earlier, Senate Bill 174 from last session, because I was concerned about some of the fly-by-night alternative certification programs is why I was really very serious about that bill, because I think there were some abuses going on in those programs, and I wanted the authority to address it. So I recognize there are strengths and weaknesses. As I said earlier, I was a proponent of alternative pathways, but I will not tolerate programs that don't serve our kids, and that are providing a disservice to teachers and sending them out ill-prepared. So that is where I come from.
If I might add, I think it's also important to point out within the sector that there's a reason there are liberal arts deans and arts and science deans here as well, is that a significant part of the preparation of teachers comes outside the School of Ed. It's also from those who teach the subject matter that they're going to teach. So it's really the whole institution that the Schools of Ed are most responsible, but overall they're cited, but it's also the math departments, the history departments, all those who contribute to the preparation of those teachers.
And just to follow up, I'm sorry, you want to go?
No, there was a question.
We'll get to that just real quick.
Please come forward a little bit so we can see you.
Interestingly enough, I was just in Washington, D.C. with all of my colleagues from across the country. Every state superintendent, commissioner of education, whatever they're called. And one of my colleagues brought up the term colleges of education. And I don't know in his state what alternative certification pathways there are. But his response to his frustration with what he said was colleges of education is, we just passed a law that said if we evaluate the teachers that come out of these programs and deem them unfit to teach kids, we are barring them from employment within our state. They can go to another state and get employment, but once we evaluate them and determine they are not fit, they're barred from employment within our state. So your statement said a lot to me, because he did use that word. I want to follow up with him and see if he meant truly college of education or if he meant prep program, because there has been a significant shift in the last decade or so.
Sir?
Yes, I think the subject has changed a little, but I want to go back to the system. I have two questions. One is, will this system account for the conditions under which people are teaching? That is, differentiate among conditions. And the second question is, will the system differentiate between accountability and achievement?
You want me to take that one? Okay, those are some lofty goals. Will it differentiate between accountability and achievement? Well, the whole point of the new system is to recognize different types of achievement. Achievement in academics, achievement in career and tech, achievement in fine arts, achievement in health and fitness programs. All of the things, if you ask parents what they want from our schools, it's not just the 4x4. If you ask business what they want people who can communicate, solve problems, and work as a team. If you went back to the framers of our Constitution, they wanted people who were versed in the subject matters of the day, could serve on a jury, and could, vote an informed ballot. So all of the things that have grown up over the years, we want, and value in our schools, we want the new system to evaluate. Yes, achievement, but not just achievement in one significant area. And then your question about whether or not all environments will be addressed. Yes. We recognize that as we make the system more complex, we put variances in it and mechanisms for districts to recognize the difficulties they face. And I go back to our school funding formulas, which are flawed, but fundamentally based on that concept that the majority of the drivers in a $50 billion a year system are designed to negate the effects of poverty. Title I, compensatory education, billion-dollar levers are designed to drive money into high-poverty areas. Now, and I put it in this context, we'll spend $50 billion to negate the effects of poverty in a trillion-dollar economy. I mean, just think about that for a second. So we have a $1+ trillion economy. We'll spend $50 billion to try to negate the effects of poverty in a state the size of Texas. Is that enough? Well, are we leveraging health and human services and social services to the maximum degree possible? Maybe, maybe not. But that's a question for our legislator leaders and policy thinkers to address. Will the accountability system reflect the variances across our state? Absolutely. But as we discuss school finance and everything else, we have to keep that same thing in mind. I guess that's my point.
So that's a growth principle, right?
Yeah.
Other questions or comments?
Well, if I could finish up, because you brought up a good point, because Dr. Paredes brings up that one of the ways that we do that is through the use of growth measure, and saying that taking a student from where they were and getting them significant gains. The growth measure over the past several months has come under significant attack because it is a projection measure. Now, any of you in higher education who understand what SAT and ACT purport to do with predictive validity understand what a projection measure really is and its validity. But there apparently are a lot of people in this state who don't understand predictive validity and that the value of a projection measure, and that you can statistically show its validity over time. So when I say that it will, if we have to eliminate the use of projection measures and growth measures, because trust me, the attacks that were made on the current projection measure are applicable to any growth measure. I have at my home a letter from a gubernatorial candidate who will remain nameless, who said Texas Education Agency is lying about the performance of public schools by giving credit for growth and not absolute success. Well, any growth measure does that. So if you have to take that phrase and make any growth measure survive that phrase politically, then no, that has to come out of the system.
That's the question back.
I need to ask the naive question here.
Would you please come up close to the...
Sounds like the mic is up.
Yeah.
I need to ask the naive question as a Dean of Sciences. I got 600 kids a year coming into developmental math, every one of whom passed their high school math standards. There's something broken here, and I'm a geologist, so I don't know how to fix it. But I think that's the issue that we're trying to deal with.
You want me to take that again?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't tell Robert that he was...
I'm on the hot seat. I don't mind. I like this because this is good stuff. This is exactly why the college readiness standards were a critical first step for us. And I'll tell you, too, with mathematics especially, I was not happy with our current math standards and not happy a lot with the current math course offerings, which is why I was a proponent of the 4x4. Our next step is we're in the process right now of developing our math standards, new math standards, that are going to be world-class. And I say world-class because some of the states that have abandoned their world-class standards in favor of the Common Core, I'm going to go grab their standards because they're good. They're really good. And they're actionable and they're implementable. And with our system, not changing course right now in the middle, I think that we can actually improve that that course of study, and particularly math. I mean, I think that once we tweak our standards and get the textbooks and professional development alignment, and I want to make a pitch to you all right now, too. There is a new program that TEA has just put together called Project Share. Have anybody heard of Project Share? Probably not around this table. Few. Every teacher in the state will eventually be signed up for this program. It is an online web portal where every teacher will be provided their professional development in the future. Like I'm a lawyer, so I can go online and get all my professional development. Teachers will be able to interact with one another and share lesson plans. It's Web 2.0, so this is going to be a huge deal. I want this to be introduced into the colleges of education as early as possible, because this is how teachers are going to communicate with each other and you all and the state for years to come. So when we get to the point that all public school teachers are enrolled, we're about 215,000 right now, or as of last week. I want to start moving into the colleges of ed because I want that technology to be so familiar to them that when someone says, I need you to build a lesson plan, this web portal will have everything they need to build their lesson plans. We've got content providers from the Smithsonian, National Archives, Public Broadcasting are giving us digital content for free. We're partnering with the New York Times, so if your student is doing a research paper on the Gettysburg Address, you type it in, you get a copy of the address, and you get a copy of the New York Times article the day after the address because they were there. So we're gathering all of this open source content from universities, from providers all across the country. It is going to be a huge deal. I want it to be introduced in colleges of education as early as possible. So I would encourage you to go to the TEA website. There's a virtual tour of it that will give you some idea. It is much more than I can tell you today. I'll give you some examples. You can go on there, and if you are a teacher moving to Texas from, say, Seattle, you can say, I'm moving to Austin, Texas, and you can type in a zip code, and it'll tell you every teaching job within 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles, and 20 miles outwards of where you're going to be living. So we've got that kind of functionality in the system. It is going to be the way we communicate with our teachers from here on out. So I would really encourage you to take a look at that.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Two things. One is that probably should be introduced to all the folks, not just in colleges of education, but also in alternative certification.
Absolutely.
routes.
We will.
Okay.
But I had you in the room, so I had to bring it up.
And the second thing I'd like to offer is, I don't know that the resistance to the econometric or value-added models comes from the fact that people don't necessarily understand projections. It comes from the fact that the nuts and bolts of how you put the model together, there are going to be real and honest disagreements about what is valid and invalid and how those things are, how it's identified is measured, variety of other kinds of considerations. So what I would ask is, as we're working towards putting these things together, that it be as open as possible and you have the opportunity to take advantage of the expertise, not just in this room, but across the state who could contribute to that conversation.
No, I agree with you completely that the intellectual arguments about how you put that system together are absolutely valid. When it got boiled down to political rhetoric is when I got a little bit irked. I mean, because no growth measure could survive the political rhetoric, which was my frustration. I got no problem validating it constantly and making sure it's completely accurate and validly used. Because what I don't want to see, I mean, I call the black box, I call it the Reasonator 3000. We need a reason to fire this teacher. We don't like her. Put the data in the system, pink slip pops out, got the reason. Well, how did you provide that teacher notice of how they were held accountable? Because the black box is not transparent. There's no way to know how the algorithm works. How did you provide that teacher due process so that they could have an improvement plan? How did you do those things with the Reasonator? Well, you didn't. And so you lose fundamentally in court. And I don't want to see that system-wide because that's not a good policy outcome. That's where I begin, and the fundamental has to be transparent, has to be replicable, and people have to be able to understand it.
If I can make a quick announcement, there is a Volvo parked in the back of our building in the handicapped area. The construction workers have got to bring material in. If it's somebody's car, it needs to be moved.
You've mentioned two different things here briefly. One, the data program that you demonstrated around the country, and second, this new online sharing program. Do you find it problematic that we don't know about those things as deans of colleges of education and they appear to be nearly in place and operational and nobody's bothered to share that with us?
Yeah, I do find it problematic. I think it's part of the reason that we're having this meeting, and I'm so glad we are, because we've lacked that kind of conversation that I could have you in a room and start talking to you, because I've been talking about this for a year and a half. I went to every editorial board that I could get that would see me in the state. None of them wrote anything about it. we partnered with the New York Times, did a press release in combination with the New York Times, got maybe one story in an online newspaper about it. However, the Project Share, the real smart people that run computer programs in this state that also participate in South by Southwest have picked it up and are doing a full symposium on Project Share for the South by Southwest before the South by Southwest Music Festival in the spring. So I think there's a lack of discussion among us, which I hope we're addressing here today, but there's also a lack of coverage of significant events that I think would help facilitate and inform the public and you all about things that are going on at the state level, and perhaps our friends in the media will do a better job of reporting the truth.
To your fundamental point, the reason I'm deferring to Robert so much is not because I'm afraid of being on the hot seat, but you all hear from me a lot, and I know that in higher education we don't hear enough from Robert Scott.
There's a gentleman way in the back.
I'd like to go back to the science dean's issue that started this part of the conversation. In San Antonio, we're trying to do something that could help, and that is to give a common target to high schools. We have 5 community colleges and 6 comprehensive universities. College Algebra 101 is different, not only across those 11 institutions, but within the institutions. Now, this is an issue that the high school teacher then has a whole lot of different targets to deal with. So one of the things we're working on now is that those 11 institutions are going to agree to the same course, agree to the exit assessment on that in terms of a dual credit course, and participate in the professional development along with the high school teachers. That effectively then is the beginning of curriculum alignment. I didn't really have a question, but I had to keep getting up to get my knees going, so I figured as long as I was standing there.
Let me add to that the coordinating board has a $2 million grant from the Lumina Foundation in which we're working with issues of transfer from community colleges to universities. Our first effort was mechanical engineering, and when we had faculty sit down from the universities and community colleges, they brought up themselves that we needed not just vertical alignment, but horizontal alignment. And so they, in the 17 courses they saw necessary for students to have the lower division before they would transfer to the universities, identified 17 courses, and in fact identified learning outcomes for each of those 17 courses that they all agreed were necessary. Didn't say how to teach them, but these are things students absolutely needed to know before they left those courses. Our staff have added those, have gone into our academic course guide manual, in which we have a common numbering system. The faculty on those committees agreed that that was important once they got over the initial talk about academic freedom and realized they still had the academic freedom. This was really talking about outcomes, and this was much more meaningful to them. Over the next 4 years, we're doing this with those programs in which about 80% of all of our college students are enrolled. Many of these courses overlap. It includes things such as calculus at this point, statics, and various other things. But our goal is to eventually get all the courses in the academic course guide manual with clear learning outcomes for those courses. This is also important for dual credit because it will provide a standard in terms of the expectations for those courses. It will be useful for our early college high schools for those courses. So you're exactly right, and what we were pleased about is that faculty and administrators from the schools recommended that it be done. We didn't ask them to do it. They realized that this was important. So I would be interested in your efforts because it could contribute to what we're trying to do statewide.
Well, and I would say that was the genesis of the discussion that we had on college and career readiness. We saw the disconnect between what high school teachers valued and taught and what college professors expected of college-ready students, and the mile-wide, inch-deep expectations for preparation they were getting in high school, whereas a narrow set of skills and knowledge that college professors really expected that students have and have down cold that really started our conversation on how we align our college and career readiness standards. And I commend you for looking at that Algebra 101, because, I mean, I can just sit here in my head and see the problems that you're going to face in trying to implement that. When you take a new syllabus to a tenured professor who's been there for 20 years and you set it down on their desk and say, throw your old syllabus away that you've used for the last 20 years, this is your new one to align to this new course, I respect what you're going to experience in terms of response, because it's the same thing that we struggle with in public education as we try to do statewide standards. You know, I've had the same prep for this same class for the last 10 years, and now I'm not about to change it. Well, we need you to look at that. And so that's part of the real struggle in standards-based reform. And I think a lot of people really don't understand that it's the translation of what happens at state level through regional service centers and the training and the instructional materials and the assessments on the back end, but really trying to get that classroom teacher to understand and change. That is really the fundamental goal of everything that we do.
I'd like to follow up on the conversation right now that Dr. Gardner brought up, and just ask if there's any consideration about these common courses be given to the development or the further development of the Common Core.
Actually, there are many things that are integrated, and Gregor might want to talk a little bit more, but we're examining the Common Core right now. We're talking about what needs to be done, maybe squeezing it in to some extent. And we've also talked to the community colleges about developing, and it might move to universities at some point, but a Common Core specifically for science and engineering, one for humanities, business, some other areas.
You scared me with the term Common Core there for a second.
That's a different Common Core.
We sort of overlap in terms of the scary things. But one of the issues in terms of transfer, in fact, is, you know, the transfer, universities must accept the Common Core and transfer, but if a student started out with the idea that they were going to become a major in history and they switched to marketing, while those courses will transfer, they will not necessarily count for a degree. So we've had some discussions about, is there a way to do it in such a way so that you still address the fundamental concerns of a Common Core, actually offer perhaps fewer choices, but make sure the student can explore but still go in the most efficient direction towards their educational goal.
This woman has been waiting
thank you, David.
patiently.
Does this work?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to move to an article that we were sent in the mail, Closing the Talent Gap, the International Study of Recruitment of Teachers. Given the reality that there's a lot of public bashing of teachers right now, and puny retirement funds that we all know about, it's always in the newspaper. Our young people read a little bit, then they see that. Lack of autonomy to be creative in the classroom. Our teachers are feeling it. Our young people are reluctant to go into a field in which they are concerned, and many parents won't let them become a teacher. What do we do about that? The obvious, of course, is the salary piece, but that's not everything. And very talented young people go into the field, and because of the lack of respect and the lack of autonomy, the lack of their ability to be creative in the classroom, they leave. They get tired. They walk out. I'm concerned about those 600 students who are in developmental math, and that's a related issue. So we're the generals. I want to know, how are we going to get these foot soldiers in there, and how do we keep them?
I think that what we're going to have to do is create a balance between the accountability system and what our overall expectations are for the development of a human child. And that being said, yes, we're going to have standardized testing. We're going to continue to have it under federal law. We're going to continue to have it under state law. But one of the other things that I've incorporated into what I just mentioned earlier, Project Share, is that every student in secondary school in the state of Texas will be able to develop an e-portfolio of their work, an e-portfolio that will carry with them through college about what happens on every other day besides the tax test day. If you're a student athlete, a student artist, if you're a performing arts student like my kids are, theater, choral, you can start capturing in video and still life pictures your achievements throughout high school, and someone can go in and put in that you received an award for progress. Or if you're doing a career and tech project, you can have an independent engineer come in and evaluate it for its effectiveness and provide additional what was I trying to think of the word? What?
Context.
Yeah, additional context for that student's work. So to really blow out what happens in a school year and not boil it down to what happened on the test day. And I think that gets to your point about teachers feeling pinned in by the test. They're pinned in because the schools that don't do it right, and I go visit these schools all the time, you go in the first 10 minutes of class, they're given the same worksheet in the same format in every class because that's the TAKS test's objective. The ones that really get it right, the students are doing project-based learning. They're doing things outside of the scope of drill and kill, but they're doing it based on TEKS objectives. The students at a school up here in East Austin, what they were doing, calculating the mass of an object by using a microwave to pop popcorn for different periods of time, and then measuring the mass that was created based on time in a microwave. Interesting way to calculate mass, but it was fun and engaging, and the students got it, and they got the objective down. So things like that. The creation of e-portfolios. We've moved away from portfolio assessment in Texas because of the subjective nature of it. So one of the things that we've incorporated in there is an analytical tool that, my son's a high school senior. If he writes an essay, he can plug the essay in the system, and based on tens of thousands of teacher decisions about essays, it'll tell him where that essay falls on the continuum to college readiness. Is it 11th grade work? Is it 12th grade work? Is it college level work? Harnessing the collective wisdom of teachers, because what I know about teachers is that when you put them in the room together and ask them to set a standard for kids, they always set standards that are higher than the system will bear. As we develop the TAKS test standard, they always want us to set it higher, and that's why when you see us set it 2 SEM, 1 SEM panel recommendation, the panel recommendation was what the teachers wanted. We had to go backwards in order for the system not to collapse. So incorporating those things into this new accountability system, I think are ways that we're going to address what you're saying there.
Let me respond to the question of recruiting more high-achieving students into teaching. There's plenty of evidence that an awful lot of very talented students are perfectly willing to go into fields that are low paying, where it's very difficult to get a foothold. Journalism is one. Some form of media reporting and so forth is now a broader field of journalism itself. Architecture is another, where the students know that the pay of most architects is quite low. First 4 or 5 years of being an architect is usually drudgery. It's very low-level work in many cases. Teach for America demonstrates that we can attract very highly talented students into teaching. I think, as I said before, I use the example of research universities because those are the types of institutions of higher education that I know best. But I know that in institutions of that type, students are often, high-achieving students are often discouraged from thinking about teaching. And the feeling among faculty in those kinds of institutions is frequently, our students are too good to go into teaching. And you have a self-perpetuating circumstance where we don't attract our brightest students. I think we have to find ways at the undergraduate level to give students opportunities to participate in teaching activities. Even I remember a couple of students of mine who became tutors in an academic support program at UCLA, and from that experience decided that they wanted to become teachers, and I stay in touch with both of them. One of them is a superintendent now, and the other one is a principal. So they've stayed with it, and they were enormously bright. I don't think that we should accept is inevitable that bright students will not be attracted to the teaching profession.
I would concur with that statement. I've got a graduating senior at home. His SAT scores is well within the top quarter of SAT scores in the country, and we're actively discussing him going into a college of education and becoming a teacher. So, it's something that I would absolutely say that, yeah, you can get the brightest individuals in there, but I also think that a deciding factor for that child would be whether or not there was a better financial aid package available to that child if they could go into a college of education. And I think that would be the swaying point for a lot of kids.
And how do you tie that to alternative cert programs?
Well, how would I tie that discussion on...
I mean, how, if you're going to hold colleges...
what I would say is that...
Or say we should be attracting the brightest students, how do you measure that when people come through an alternative cert program?
You know, I think that what we're looking at with alternative certification programs are the outcomes, and we'll hold them accountable in the same way. We want to see them be effective, and when we do that teacher-student link, the same expectation is going to be there. Where I think colleges of education will have an advantage is that what I would say is that more financial aid would be available to attract them. I don't necessarily know that I would do that through alternative certification, but it's something I would study.
Well, and also in response to your comment, what I hear from superintendents over and over and over again is that we would prefer to hire university-trained teachers, or we're not getting enough of them. So I think that what we have to do, and that's one of the purposes of this meeting, is find effective ways to attract more high-achieving undergraduates into the teaching profession.
And I couldn't agree more, and I think that what we have learned from programs like Teach for America are that we can attract the brightest into education for a time. And how can we make the profession as prestigious for university-trained educators as we can for Teach for America? That's the real goal. I mean, I want to attract the best and brightest into your programs.
Art had his hand up, and then this gentleman.
Commissioners, I want to just take the opportunity to endorse the suggestion about special student financial aid assistance to individuals who are interested in pursuing the teaching profession. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I don't know that anybody in this room would disagree with that. We'd very much like to see that, and if there are ways in which we can facilitate that, I would be willing to do whatever we could.
I'm going to get myself in trouble here for a second. It has been suggested to me, and I'm not an expert in higher education, it has been suggested to me that colleges of education have been treated as cash cows in the past, and that the resources that come to them are not the same as go to other departments. Would you tend to agree that you are fairly compensated in comparison to your colleagues in other departments? Okay, so...
What's the question?
Other colleges.
Are you asking about salary? Or are you
No, I'm talking about just resources available to the college. This is just a suggestion. People over the years have suggested to me that colleges of education do not receive as high enough resources as other colleges. And this is just, like I'm saying, I'm not an expert, I just want your opinion.
So are you talking about formula funding?
Well, I know formula funding doesn't, there's probably not as much formula funding, but please.
I would suggest that we can always do better with more, and that's not just a gratuitous statement. So, for example, one of the things that Bob alluded to earlier, the kinds of research that really need to guide the decision making are sophisticated and therefore very expensive kinds of research that are really outside the capability of most of any of us, regardless of our expertise, to mount. We're talking about large-scale, multi-level, fairly complex design studies that would require significant kind of resources. We don't have the resources to do that kind of stuff. The other thing that would be very helpful would be to have some ability to have some resources to help sustain inquiry that's locally based. So in addition to trying to inform the field, it would be great if through maybe the regional service centers or some other mechanisms, we had access to funds to study the very real problems that our educational entities are facing in our respective areas, to be able to provide our expertise for that. And then lastly, the way that funds within an institution are distributed depend a lot on a variety of different things, the mission, the priorities, and so forth of that institution. A strong commitment from the state, a demonstrated commitment from the state, but what I mean by that is money to basically indicate the priority that's being placed on education would go a long way to influencing the local politics of how resources are disseminated. And that doesn't have to come directly to the colleges of education. Let's fund the students who want to come into our programs. They can come into our programs. They can be loan forgiveness programs. They make commitments to teach for certain periods of time, so on, and not just in underserved areas and not just under-resourced students, but the best and the brightest.
I would just simply suggest that if there were ways to give colleges of education resources to attract and retain higher quality faculty that want to be in the classroom providing practical instruction on teaching, and financial aid to attract students. And I would dare suggest, and I know I could get myself in real trouble, as I said, but I would dare suggest that in the evaluation of universities to become Tier 1 status, that an examination of their commitment to their colleges of education should be a criteria in determining whether they become a Tier 1 institution and maintain a Tier 1 institution. I would just simply put that out there for thought.
Our rules will be considered at the January board meeting.
Dr. Seidman's been waiting patiently, and then Jarrell Booker, I think, was hoping to speak, and then I'll come back over here and over here. How's that?
I just wanted to say something about the question of providing sufficiently many numbers of students who want to become teachers. I think that's a critical problem, but I wonder whether it wouldn't help us to distinguish between those who are seeking education, elementary education careers, and it seems to me, at least from Texas State, there's no shortage of those, but there's a great shortage of students who want to teach chemistry or physics. And I think we need to be, if we're providing incentives for students to pursue these paths, we have to not scattershoot. We have to be very careful how we target our limited resources.
We address that on the back end a little bit with the loan forgiveness programs, but in science, special education, bilingual ed, those are all shortage areas that we at least on the back end do some loan forgiveness for. So I think we need to do a more targeted approach.
Add in on that, because it raises a concern I've had for some time. For those of you that have engineering programs, and you select students who, though they've been admitted to your institution, whether they can go into engineering or not, those students are prime candidates to be math and science, chemistry, physics, but too frequently there's no effort to offer those students an alternative. And you can't get someone who's interested in history to become a chemistry teacher, but you can get someone who wants to be an engineer to become a chemistry teacher. At least there's that potential. They have the ability, they have the basic interest.
So we're actually trying.
Strategy that's being overlooked at, from what I understand, all of our institutions.
We've been looking a bit at that.
I can't resist the temptation to put in a plug for our formula funding recommendations. One of the provisions in our recommendation for changes in formula funding is that we give institutions extra credit, a bonus point, so to speak, for graduating students in fields that are of urgent interest to the state. And STEM, secondary school teaching in STEM, is one of those fields. So that I would hope that one of the consequences of our formula funding recommendations, assuming it gets approved by the legislature, would be that institutions would give more attention to graduating students in those fields, including high school math and science teachers.
In other words, your presence in regions would benefit from knowing that the schools of ed can benefit from our funding proposal.
Dr. Jarrell Booker.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on a couple of things and come home. Two of them have gone by, but I at least wanted to tell you, the Commissioner talked about Project Share. The reason some of you haven't heard it, we've done a big rollout for our teachers. They were the first ones out the door. You'll be probably hearing something in the spring from my division to try to tell you how you can get on board. We're trying to work out the ID numbers and things. They were built for teachers, but now we're doing it for universities and trying to fit the alternative certification programs in. Some of them are private, so there's certain issues we have to deal with that because we spent a great amount of effort building this process. The other piece was the teacher effectiveness metric we talked about with Senate Bill 174. We're having some preliminary smaller meetings right now, but come spring, all of you will get at least notification to attend a stakeholder meeting to talk about those metrics. We're doing a lot of research and background right now to say this is what we think is the best recommendation. So when we do call and invite you to the stakeholder meeting, please attend, because once it's done and completed, I really don't want a lot of people calling back and saying, how come I wasn't included or didn't have anything to say? particularly when we're going to invite you 2 and 3 times to come to these meetings. So that will happen also in the spring, and will go throughout the year. One piece I wanted to touch on is the recruitment of teachers. We have a campaign called The Best Teach in Texas. I think a lot of times we have been beating up on teachers, and it's starting to mount, and if you have any good sense, you won't become one, because everyone is beating up on you. And we disagree. We're at TEA. We're a big fan. We think teachers are professional, and we want to make sure that they know that. So there's going to be a media push. There'll be billboards. There'll be banner ads on the internet to say The Best Teach in Texas. We have a new website coming out for it also. Part of that will say why it is good to be a teacher. We have research that shows that most people become teachers because they had a good one that influenced them, or they have some need that's innate that they want to give back and do good, which is what Teach for America actually harps on. Now, you may not keep people anymore for 10 and 15 years. The mindset of Generation Y teachers has changed. They're not going to be anywhere for 10 or 15 years. You'll get a good 3, hope for the best, and maybe they'll keep going. And that's in any profession, not just education. So those numbers are going to start to bear out at some point. But for the time being, we're finding in our research that people aren't excited about becoming teaching because the teachers themselves aren't necessarily showing excitement in some instances. We have something called Power On Texas, where we found that teachers who work on their iPads or their Macs, their Airs, their iPhones, they get to school and they power down to teach. And that's no fun for them, and it's clearly no fun for these students who are raised up with Wii's and PlayStations and everything else. So trying to change what's exciting for Generation Y is what's going to get them excited into profession, and we're hoping that our Best Teach in Texas touch on all those, and hopefully you'll be seeing that coming soon to a radio, to a billboard, to internet sites, because that's something we think is very important.
Dr. Cummings has been waiting for a while, and then I'll come to you, and then we need to kind of shift and let me move this in another direction. Dr. Cummings?
Good afternoon. Obviously, there are many perspectives on the questions before us, and I'm a little bit limited in terms of what I want to say because of time, and I know everybody around this table can talk for 3 hours because that's one of the things that we do. However, I did want to speak to a couple of things that I think may be germane to the conversation and hope that maybe someone will pick up on it. One, I've got a dual responsibility here today, is to enlist your support in the continuation and the growth of HBCUs. I want you to understand what's going on in the public policy environment with regard to the maintenance, the sustainability of HBCUs. And if you need information on that, all you have to do is let me know and I'll supply it. The second thing is, we've been talking about a lot of, I think, promises associated with resources. And the last time I checked, we're going to be in a redistributive policy environment when the legislature convenes. And so we're going to have to make do with less than what we need. And so one of the things that I think that we need, having had both the PK-12 experience and the higher ed experience, is a connection between the two that matters, not just in terms of words, but in terms of actions. And one of them is going to have to be somewhere along the line, we all have to deal with what has been termed in very negative terms as opportunity to learn standards. That's going to impact teaching, and that's going to impact learning. And the only way to get at it is to get at it. And as long as we talk around it by separate categories of schooling, we will not affect the pipeline problems that we have. And so I'm suggesting that there are 3 things, and some of them were covered in our articles, particularly like what Diane Ravitch had to say about the impact of poverty. We also have a problem with school type. We also have a problem with teacher quality, as we've been discussing. We also have a problem with community expectations. We have a problem with equity, excellence, and legitimacy. And all of those things have to play out in a political climate that is ripe for redistributing resources rather than coming up with new resources. That's more of a commentary than a question. But the question is, what are we going to do about all these things that seem to impact what we all want to do, which is to do a better job in turning out quality teachers who will turn out excellent students who will turn out a revised and enhanced state of communities.
Well, I can respond from my perspective. And having gone through the rounds of budget cuts this year, and I'm the guy that was sent over in 2003 when we had a $10 billion budget shortfall to downsize the agency by about a third in 9 weeks. So over the course of the summer of 2003, I had to let go about a third of the staff at TEA. And it was not a pleasant experience. That was a similar budget year potentially to what we face this year. It could be a lot worse. My goal is to protect the foundation school program to the greatest degree possible. If I have to sacrifice some grant programs that are outside of formula, if I have to recommend deferring a payment here or tucking something there or recommending the State Board of Education that they give more payment out of the permanent school fund, which they did this week. They gave us $2.9 billion that the legislature has now to work with to preserve the major source of funding for our schools, the foundation school program. That is my first objective. I can't justify anything outside of preserving that foundation school program. That has to be my first goal. Now, you mentioned opportunity to learn. That is something that we are always mindful of in a standards-based system, that we require districts to certify that regardless of how they're doing it, whether it's through online materials, through traditional textbooks and their instruction, that they are covering the required material for our students to make sure that we don't deny a student an opportunity to learn and then hold them accountable on a high-stakes test without giving them that opportunity. So that's something we're consistently mindful of, and part of the reason why I recommended to the legislature last week that they do include the purchase of new English language arts and supplemental science textbooks, even in a tough budget year, because we are still holding students accountable for those courses, and we need to make sure that we provide those instructional materials. So we're going to be vigilant on that as we go into the session.
Okay, and the last comment, and then we'll move to another.
A comment's been made here maybe more than once that there could be the perception that a university with a research focus could be in a way orthogonal to the issue of teacher preparation and the issues we're discussing here. And in a way that's true. In the matter of this Tier 1 pursuit, House Bill 51, if you look at the benchmarks that are established there, none of those, of course, address the issues we're discussing here. But like, what's the one criteria that every university must meet? $45 million in restricted research expenditures. And if you look at the definition of restricted research expenditures, it precludes, for instance, support from NSF programs like the Robert Noyce Scholars Program or the GK-12 program that does promote recruitment of teachers into the STEM fields. So I guess what I'm saying here is the coordinating board itself could develop a more coherent message about how you coordinate research aspirations to something as important as teacher preparation and recruitment of teachers into the profession.
I'd like to ask McGregor Stevenson to respond to that.
I think one of the challenges with looking at and evaluating restricted research expenditures is it truly doing research, or is it being focused toward other activities? And I'm not as familiar with the project that you're talking about, so I'll be happy to discuss it with you afterwards if you'd like to. But the problem is the definition of what is research and what is a contractual effort to carry out a specific program.
Well, so in a way, I think we're splitting hairs.
That's my job at the time, I'm afraid.
I think that the message should be it's important to the state to develop research and it's important to have good teachers. And you send a message to universities that it's a priority for them when there's a very liberal interpretation of how their scholarly and funding activities all contribute to this mission. And right now, it's not really that way.
And I think part of that is how the institutions are focusing their efforts in terms of, are they putting emphasis on serving education students, or are they putting emphasis on moving to be Tier 1 research universities? And I think that's part of the dichotomy that institutions run into when they're trying to make administrative allocation of resources and making those decisions. Now, in terms of what we're trying to do with evaluating restricted research expenditures, we're trying to look at the research capacity of an institution. We're not trying to look at the production of teachers. We're not trying to look at the quality of programs. The only thing that measure is being used for is to look at the amount of restricted research that's being conducted at that institution for comparison purposes and for evaluation purposes. So I understand the argument, and I'll be happy to talk to you further about it, but I'm afraid that's where the hair got split.
Well, and it's not really splitting the hair, I have to say, in this case, because the reality is some of the types of research that Bob was talking about, I think, earlier, supporting in regard to education, would, in fact, be counted in this analysis. And I have to say that in terms of what is counted and not, even prior to NRUF, has been discussed by institutions across the state for at least 20 years. Yeah. And it continues to be evaluated every year. There's a group that comes together every year and reviews that. It's the foundation of it, or it's the National Science Foundation definition, and part of what we're looking at is comparison with other states, and also adherence to, so it's actually reflected in your institution's annual financial reports. And so I can tell you, on top of it, every institution is looking at every other institution to evaluate whether it's research or not. So this is not a new thing. It's been very open. We've had untold meetings in this very room on this same topic. But in our report on research expenditures, we do include other types of things beyond restricted research, the type of thing we're talking about.
And we, I should say that once again, our formula funding recommendations would encourage institutions to do exactly what you referred to, seek training grants, and that would produce more teachers and that would get funded through the performance-based recommendation we've made. It's intended to cover that. So we've really put an incentive in our formula funding recommendation that affects not only the 7 emerging research universities, but all of the universities in Texas.
In fact, in our annual reports on research expenditures, that type of work is clearly recognized in that report every year.
So last thing I'll say, I didn't mean to strike an antagonistic tone at all, but more or less it's how to send a message that in a university all these things matter, because these kind of issues do affect faculty activity, tenure and promotion, and when you're trying to encourage people to get involved in outreach, things like this do filter down to that level.
Yeah, we didn't take your remark as being an attack at all, and in fact I promise that we'll revisit the issue and see if there's a better way we can define what we're doing.
We haven't even begun to get antagonistic yet. Let's wait. Let's talk phonics here in a minute.
We have sent messages to other folks at your institution that the type of activity you're talking about is important and it is undervalued at the institutions, and we know that's the case, and we don't intend for that to happen through this other process.
Okay. We've had wide-ranging discussion on what variety of topics. Obviously, it seems to be any topic has been open for discussion. One of the things that I've been asked to do is to make sure we do have enough opportunity for us to come out with whatever you would like to offer or suggest for some concrete suggestions for us, follow-up, etc. I direct your attention to the questions, not that we have to go through these questions, but they are thought provokers, I hope. The questions we generated several months ago are on your agenda. How can the THECB and TEA work more effectively with educator preparation programs? If there are suggestions you have for us as staff and as leaders, policy leaders.
Can I hone that down more specifically when you're done?
You may. Go right ahead.
Dr. Peretta said something earlier that's been brought to my attention on a number of occasions as well, and that is that superintendents believe in many cases that teachers come out of education prep programs, and I use the term ed prep programs very specifically, that they come out of ed prep programs ill-prepared to directly teach students, lacking an understanding of phonics, phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, and how the expectations of the public schools are going to be utilized in the classroom. How can we work together to address that concern? And I just would focus that question not just on phonics, but on, whether it's discovery versus direct instruction in math. How are the colleges of education approaching the concepts? Are they theoretical? Are they pragmatic? Because what I found that in most of these big debates, English wars, math wars, that you ultimately wind up with a balance of phonics and whole language, of direct instruction and discovery, and that you wind up with that balance in the end in the public schools. And I would like to see us have that conversation in the colleges of ed as well.
And to extend it a bit, I hear that from superintendents that new students don't know anything about TAKS. They don't know anything about TEKS. They don't know the difference between TEKS and TAKS. I hear that recurrently.
I'd like to start off just to comment on the items about phonemic awareness and phonics and all that, because those are really important to me. I work in the area of literacy, and I couldn't agree with you more that in order for us to develop a comprehensive, well-balanced program, it requires both that and attention to comprehension instruction.
Sure.
So that there's, and also a lot of contact and communication with kids with books, specifically books that fit them and are of interest and relevant to them. So I think to talk about one without the other is ill-conceived.
No, I think that's fair, and that's exactly the kind of feedback I want. What can we do to facilitate that discussion down into the teaching ranks?
The other thing I think that is relevant is the importance of addressing these issues both from a theoretical and a practical perspective. I think one of the things we've seen over the years is the importance of providing hands-on experiences in real schools with real children to allow students going through a prep program to have the experience of seeing how the theoretical concepts talked about in their classrooms actually play out in the real world, and then have time to reflect on those both with their classroom teacher, their mentors, their supervisors, and then back also with their professors in their classrooms.
Right, and I guess that relates to one of the stories I read in the San Antonio Express this morning. Representative Villarreal filed a bill to require 15 additional hours of pre-service training through the development of lesson plans or, I guess, direct instruction before becoming certified. And I guess I'd like to get y'all's thoughts on that as well.
Bob, and then...
Yeah, I guess I find the comments about what superintendents are saying a little dumbfounding, and I thought, well, why would that be? And I think it's in part because we consult with HR people. University of Houston has a 34-district consortium with 12 folks we meet with from HR every month. And we put the question to them, if we were to change our program in this way or that way, what do you think? And second, we asked 2 meetings ago, for example, we're working on an involvement with a group called the Nyhouse Center in Reading that focuses on dyslexia and 504. If we were to have our students, we don't have room in their program to require a full semester with Nyhouse, but if they did it as an elective, would they be more hireable? The answer was probably not. That's not what we're looking for. We also said we're invested in middle school in single subject certification. Math, science, we think that's important. They said we do too, but they're not going to be hireable in the future. My observation there is, number one, superintendents, we talk to superintendents and involve them in our executive EDD program for administrators. We talk to HR people about teachers, okay? So there may be a little bit of a disconnect
in the
there,
conversation.
Right? And just an observation.
No, I think that's great.
And second, we feel almost, we're taking a workforce approach, and it's a very uncomfortable one, because the things that we believe would produce strong math and science teachers in particular, as a U-Teach replication, in middle school, ready for high school, the folks in HR are saying, we're not going to be able to hire this. We're going to need
Can you give me some
comprehensive.
examples, please?
Well, they're saying we want the what's the term for it? The comprehensive. Composite. The generalist. We want generalist middle school teachers because that's who we're able to hire and use flexibly because of the grade levels in schools. This is a really important
conversation to have right now because I do believe that regardless of what the financial situation is with the legislature, that there is a desire and there will be a prioritization of resources for a middle school initiative. And so getting that right, and when I asked about middle school, I say, we stop teaching reading in middle school, and that's a shame. And we need to be focusing on pre-algebra skills and making sure students have them down cold before they get to Algebra 1 or they're sunk. Yeah. And so that discussion of whether it's composite or discrete, we should definitely continue to have that dialogue.
It turns out to be an HR issue purely and simply because of the age levels of schools and principals' flexibility in assigning teachers and who's held responsible as the accountable teacher and what their certificate is. They need absolute flexibility, which is the composite. And they're always hemmed in if they have a single subject certified teacher, even if they have a dual subject certified teacher.
And I bet, Ray, is this an issue that SBEC is addressing now? I recall that this was an issue that we'd talked about.
Yeah, it is, and it's getting somewhat been mitigated a little bit when we moved to the EC6 certificate.
Yes. Right.
That helped a great deal in terms of particularly 5th and 6th grade. The issue that we're talking about with SBEC, and I'm glad you raised it, Commissioner, is that one of the things that we have been recommended, and it came out of the NCTQ report, about that we should have a separate test for the science of reading, and that we should have a separate exam. That's being discussed at the SBEC board. We have a number of critics, most of them coming from some of your universities and colleges, come to the SBEC board meeting complaining about the composite certificate, particularly in math and science, because the way it's set up right now, a person taking the exam could pass, meet the composite requirement, but however fail, for example, on the chemistry portion or the biology portion, or more likely the physics portion of the exam.
And then be assigned to that class.
Exactly, right. Okay. And get assigned to a physics class, and their capacity for physics is very limited. So we have that dichotomy. So we are looking. Those discussions are going to be taking place. Of course, we also have the recommendation come out of NCLB that we go EC6 and 712. That we have single subject matter tests from grade 7 through 12. So those discussions will be happening at the SBEC board meeting in the next several months through the spring. And your participation, your involvement, it would be greatly appreciated.
And I think that discussion will continue through the legislative session. I know Chairwoman Shapiro is very interested in a middle school initiative, so your thoughts there as well as we go into this would be very helpful.
Let me just say we've been around the block on this. When EC6 was proposed and we saw the demise of the 4.8 certificate, it concerned us because of the single subject matter orientation for middle schools. Mm-hmm. We also understand the concerns. The largest employers in the rural areas are the school districts, and they need the most flexibility.
Just employers everywhere.
I know that this is a contest, but we need to be careful that we don't say out of one side of our mouths, we need the strongest math and science prepared kids we can get to reduce the 600 in developmental, and in Houston to prepare them for technologies and biomed. We need that, but we're not going to have focused teaching for them until they get to high school. And we need to make sense of that contest.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Not to mix subjects, but the idea of keeping discrete math courses right now for me is paramount, and that the traditional algebra, geometry, algebra 2, and then a fourth year of advanced, whether it's AP statistics or whatever, is the 4x4, and not moving into a faddish blended math that's not really been proven, that doesn't have a research base, is really important to me right now, because I know that's a kind of a percolating issue out there. Should we do like we did for integrated physics and chemistry for math. And what I say is IPC can be a great course if it's taught properly by a great teacher, but if it's not, it can be made to be whatever it wants to be. And I worry that our math programs could be eroded if we allowed that to happen.
Jerry? Oh, I'm sorry. I think you and then Jerry.
All right. There's a couple of disconnects here that I just want to point out. And a couple players that have to be involved in trying to resolve some of those disconnects. I see students all the time that are coming to me who think that the only alternative they have is alternative teacher certification. Now, why is that? Because the curriculum in arts and sciences they're an impediment to them to graduating in a timely manner. English and history right now still require 14 hours of a foreign language. Rather than being flexible, perhaps, in dealing, let's say, in English with something like linguistics, adding, let's say, 6 hours of linguistics that could substitute for 6 hours of foreign language. The foreign language is a significant impediment to students going into English or into history for their certification. When it comes to math, we are forced to take transfer students who have at the community college level taken their Concepts 1 and 2 courses, Math 1 and 2, that don't prepare them for Math 3 in the 400 level courses. It's not fair to the students coming into our schools with those sorts of deficiencies because they're not going to pass the state test to teach. Those sort of disconnects have to be taken care of in order to encourage students in higher education to get their teaching certificate in universities rather than going an alternative route.
I get in trouble every time I say this, but I'm going to continue to say it. We teach language completely backward in this country. If you want to teach language, you teach it when they're young, when they're developing, and you don't wait till high school or college and require 2 credits in high school and 14 hours in college. But I get in trouble every time I say that, but I'm going to keep saying it because it's true. Don't keep it.
Jerry.
Just a note. Quite a few years ago, Texas changed the way it did teacher preparation for high school. That doesn't seem to have worked out too well, based on the conversations. Those of us in education have very limited influence on high school teachers. We don't have enough time for the clinical program. And I'm not suggesting that arts and sciences is responsible. They're teaching math or teaching English or those things. But we have very limited influence over secondary education teachers. Many times they decide, oh, I'm in math, I wonder if I can get a job. I'll catch the 15 credits in education and get accredited to teach. We can't do the clinical. We know clinical practice makes a difference. And we don't have the ability, because of the way we've structured secondary education preparation in Texas, to get that clinical practice. And it's a very difficult situation. And, we catch the blame in colleges of education for that when we do 15 credits of 120 that the student takes. Now, somehow that doesn't seem quite fair to me under the circumstance.
Well, I would simply say that this student or teacher prep program link might be an answer to that question. Because if the data shows us that what you're saying is absolutely true in most cases, then it's going to be really hard for us not to address that issue through policy. I mean, it's going to be compelling for us to have to go back and address that shortage or that deficiency of those teachers if they're not providing adequate instruction based on that.
Dr. Gonzalez.
First of all, Commissioners, it's an honor to be here. And having served as a superintendent over the last 5 years of my life, I could say that I'm on the other side of the spectrum now, really relishing in the conversation, the conjecture. I think that we've managed to embrace an accountability model that has made a difference, especially with the subgroups. And here for Texas, who has identified true needs with the subgroups and said we're going to educate all students. And I think that there's some outcomes that we could definitely trumpet and say, wow, we're doing a great thing in this state. On the other hand, having worked on a premise that what gets monitored is what gets done, when you're under the umbrella of a very stern accountability model, in the higher ed culture and world, I think we could say that what gets legislated and what gets funded gets done. And so just what you speak to with regards to language learning and how we're teaching language learners maybe in the wrong way, I think that we are, for far too long, teaching teachers how to teach in an isolated model, where superintendents and current master teachers and middle managers or even board members, I fear to say, aren't brought to the table to add to the curricula or to the curricular offerings. And so as such, I know that our charge from our chancellor in the A&M system has been to really take a close look at how we're preparing teachers. And for about a year now, we've had an emphasis in that. And at A&M San Antonio, you know how difficult it is to get superintendents to come to the table. I mean, I've met with you as a member of TSA, Texas School Alliance, and other venues where we've had conversations just like this with superintendents, and we're blaming higher ed. And so I could say that in the last 6 months, I'm proud to say that every superintendent in the San Antonio area has come to Texas A&M San Antonio. That's 11, all at once. And all of our community college presidents, all at once, sat at the same table to discuss teacher education and to discuss the needs of students. Not so much the dichotomized worlds that we live in, but to discuss curriculum and how it should be offered from high school through the community college process onto the higher ed. And it's made a tremendous difference in what we're doing in teacher ed in San Antonio. But without bringing superintendents to the table, without bringing community college presidents to the table, and then their counterparts, or I should say their vice presidents and their deans or their assistant superintendents, who are their workhorses, to the table, it's difficult to get done what we really want to get done.
No, I appreciate that, and I started off my conversation this morning with we've been pointing fingers at each other for a long time, so it's high time that we had these conversations, not only here, but you're exactly right, with superintendents, community college presidents, and as we talk about the work we do on the P16 Council, and Raymond and I were talking about how we spread that out across the state. That's a perfect example right there.
Let's go over here. We have 2 people, and then back to Dr. Kroc.
I just want to go back to the direct experience comment a while back. I think I know we're not alone in that our students start their clinical practice as early as their sophomore year if they've identified ed prep. They're in the school for hundreds, over 300 hours of pre-service instruction before they ever start student teaching. Our problem now is beginning to be, and what I think Commissioner Scott and Paredes can help us with, is superintendents are beginning to say, we can't handle this anymore. As our numbers are increasing, and they are increasing again, thank goodness, they're saying, we just can't handle all those hours and all those students and all those supervisors, and we don't want them in here during tax. We don't want any extra people in the building, even though we see that as a real plus. So we need your help. As you tell us we need to do more clinical practice, which we agree with 100%, we need your help in helping us get the public schools to take their share of the responsibility for that. And it's easy to get them to say, yes, we will. We host superintendents on our campus all the time. But then when it comes down to placing them and giving them the experience and the hours and the supervision, it becomes a different story.
I appreciate that, and I have heard that expressed to me as well. And one of the things I have thought of is that teachers that lack clinical experience are doing not just the students a disservice at times, but themselves a disservice if they get into the profession and realize too late that they did not want to be in this profession. So one of the things I've been kicking around is, if the superintendents don't want them in the classroom environment, would they allow them to mentor a child? And a teacher one-on-one with a child might gain a much more focused experience in understanding learning disabilities and understanding cultural and behavioral problems, and be able to understand that on an individual student level. Maybe that's one way that we could provide some time for teachers to directly interact with a student in a mentoring and instruction level like that. That may be one way to look at it.
But when one of the most often cited problems is classroom management, One-on-one is going to be really, you're not going to be able to develop good classroom management skills one-on-one.
Well, with a 14-year-old nonverbal aggressive, you might really get to learn some classroom management and actually some jiu-jitsu as well. But no, I appreciate your concern, and I think that's true. But I think that there might be some value there, and there might be a little bit of a take with the superintendents and principals saying, this is causing me a problem. Well, maybe there's another way we can think about it. I'm open to ideas.
We will. I promise that we'll gather information from all of you, and Robert and I will get together and talk about how he and I can work together to help address this issue.
Over here.
Thank you for calling it to our attention.
Years ago, the Hogg Foundation for Mental Health sponsored a symposium. Maybe some of you were here for that. The conversation was almost identical to the conversation today. And one of the things that Skip Mino said at that meeting was, we don't have a lack of certificated teachers in the state of Texas because most have dropped out. And that fact resonates with me today. I think one of the things you all could help with is some analyses and meta-analyses of data looking at why do teachers drop out of the profession. You're talking a lot about pipeline, but I was looking at retention in the profession as being probably just as important a metric. Why do teachers drop out, and what can we do to address the circumstances for their dropping out?
And the numbers are proportionally the same today as they were when Commissioner Mino made that statement. And a great deal of respect for Commissioner Mino. He hired me at the agency in 1994 when I first came there, and I've been there a long time, starting with him and through many commissioners, and the same theme has come up. And the research does show a lot of reason that the early dropout is for family reasons. They choose to have family. But the long-term reason is lack of management support. It's not benefits and salary and pension. It's lack of support in the office, and it's discipline and not being able to feel supported when a discipline decision has been made. So those are the things that are cited as very high frequency as the reasons that teachers decide to ultimately leave the profession.
Figure out how to address those.
That's right.
Yeah.
Dr. Crock, and then I'll come back over here. Sorry.
Not a question, but I wanted to give you some encouragement on the middle school initiative. Each year, Texas A&M graduates about 100 dual certification middle school math science teachers. 3 weeks ago, we had a teacher placement fair, started at 8 o'clock in the morning. By 9:18, districts had extended contracts to 47 middle school math science teachers. They were all gone. We were out. There were no more on the shelves and no more in the warehouse. What I'm suggesting by that is that this last fall, when I heard Karen Lunam suggest that middle school certification might eventually disappear, I was really distressed, and she's probably heard from me more than she wants to hear from me. But both at Texas A&M and in consultation with those districts that are part of our teacher advisory center, we would really plead for keeping those dual certification programs alive, especially in math science for middle school, because they provide something extra special, I think, that the K-6, EC6, and that the 712 programs can't provide. And that is that they are zeroing in on the special needs and abilities of middle school students. The pedagogy is different at that level. Plus, we're able to provide a minimum of 30 hours of mathematics instruction at the college level, 32 hours of science at the minimum for those folks. They're well prepared in their subject matter area. They have a lot of field experience going through that program, and so they are well prepared as they can be for doing that. So as you engage in that middle school initiative, I think some special consideration needs to be given to that. Second thing, I want to talk a little bit about the retention issue. A&M graduates more engineers each year than any other university in the country. There is not a single one of those that moves out into the profession that hits the ground running and is able to perform as an unsupervised brand new professional engineer. And I think that's one of the issues that we really need to come to grips with in teacher preparation, and it probably means some added expense and some added investment. But we kind of assume if we do a good job in preparation and the folks have been able to get a job, they're able to survive out there. I still remember, and a lot of us in this room do, the terror of facing those kids day after day, and most of us were ready to quit by the first Christmas when we realized what we were up against. We really need some help and support for those teachers during those first 3 to 5 critical years, because although we know they probably won't stay in the profession 40 years like most of us have, we probably can encourage them to stay longer if we give them the kind of help, support, and guidance so that they can be successful. So encouragement on those two things.
Yeah, and you know, the Texas Beginning Educator Support System, TexBES, has been funded and supported by different teachers groups for many years. It is one tool. I do think that part of the reason that I've been promoting this online portal is because educators are a very isolated profession. You know, you close the door and you're standing in front of a room full of kids, and the opportunity to interact with other teachers, whether it be in person or online, and gain experience and lesson plans and knowledge about how to handle classroom management techniques, I think that will be one other, you know, arrow in the quiver, so to speak, to help us advance that issue as well. And we will continue to talk about certification in middle school, definitely.
Back over here, and then I think Jerry Thomas, and then just this gentleman.
I just want to ditto what was just said about the conditions of young teachers in the workplace. Our system does not support young teachers in the novice teachers in the workplace. We tend to give them the most challenging settings, and they are the least experienced. And it's that same concept of the professional engineers. That is not the way that we should do that. Principals know better. Superintendents know better. HR people know better. Teachers know better. We still do it. So there are issues in higher ed and working and trying to think about how to alter the nature of our clinical portion, our clinical preparation portion. But there are serious, very serious problems with the ways in which we bring our novice teachers, our new teachers into the profession once they're employed. And that's something that higher ed has little to do with, and alternative certification in some ways has little to do with that.
Yeah, and the legislature has grappled with this issue of mentoring and ongoing professional development, particularly for beginning teachers. I would also point out that a salary structure that only differentiates $10,000 to $15,000 over the course of a 20 to 30-year career, it forces teachers or more experienced teachers into the decision of going into administration rather than staying in the classroom. And so that's the other side of that equation on how we develop this, which is why when we did our differentiated compensation, we looked at the TAP model, which was how do you keep a really good teacher in the classroom and allow them to earn more money rather than having to go into administration. And we were giving out one of the Milken Awards, you know, this surprise $25,000 check that's a secret. The governor and I were sitting there, and the individual that won the award credited not only her colleagues as teachers, but their differentiated pay plan for keeping her engaged and in the process. And so would have gone probably to the district office, but stayed as a teacher and a principal because of the school's recognition of that fact.
Jerry, then this gentleman, then over here.
We've hit accidentally on my area of research, and I want to point out that there's extensive research across airplane pilots, sport performance, experts in law and teaching, that it takes roughly 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert. In teacher years, that's roughly 7 years. We just heard earlier, Teach for America, how long do they last? Maybe we last a little longer in our teaching preparation programs, but if we want expert teachers, We've got to give them the clinical practice in the schools, starting with their preparation program, but we can't give them 10,000 hours of practice. And the school systems have to mentor them and bring them along in the same way. When somebody said novice teachers a while ago as beginners, they're right. They are novices. You don't want a novice airplane pilot flying your plane.
Okay, thank you, sir.
This comment is really related to how I could see the coordinating board and the Texas Education Agency working together to try and facilitate. And I think the issue is really speaking, not only speaking, but acting in a coherent fashion with a number of the players that are in this room. And what I mean by that is we're in a situation where people are talking about clinical training as being so critical. Obviously, when you're engaging clinical training, it is a situation in which you're not going to have 150 students that you're going to be responsible for. The implication for that is the fact that it really does require a different weighted formula funding model. And that has been argued for some period of time, and I would suggest that rather than talk about it, really advocate for this directly. At the same time, by the way, in a political context, we have the Texas Public Policy Forum that's talking about accountability of faculty and using things like student credit hour production and weighted funding as an evidence of productivity of faculty. So I think the fact is, if we're going to really respond coherently, we need to do that. We need to address that as an issue. The second is the fact that I think, I'll make a generalization here, the people sitting in this room are committed to accountability. Accountability in terms of the quality of their teachers, the qualities of their programs, the qualities of their faculty that are engaged in these kinds of activities. And I would hazard to guess that there's a lot of accountability activity that's going on. But I think, and I hear you both, and the coordinating board and TEA, having a lot of discussion about accountability. On the other hand, I hear a lot of anecdote that is not backed up with data, accountability specifically. I just came back from Washington. Well, actually, I've been there a couple of times over this semester, and I was meeting with the Senate, as a senior staffer in the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, and basically their notion was that we get a lot of data. Don't think that we don't have data about what's going on in education in general and teacher preparation, etc. The issue is that they see anecdote as evidence. And if they get 3 anecdotes, that represents replication and generalization. So I guess I'm saying that you may be hearing from superintendents, but I would argue we have to be very careful about making generalizations on the basis of these kinds of issues. I think, the TFA has been brought up in various indicators. We do know the fact that the dropout rates, the retention issues are incredibly problematic. We also know that they become more effective once they get into and comparable once they're in the 3rd year. Okay. Well, the fact is there's very few that are in the 1st year, but they have got an incredible press, an incredible level of reflection, ranging from the federal government, which got the Scale-Up Project, one of the 5 Scale-Up projects, and that's supposed to be people who have evidence effectiveness. And in fact, there's little evidence of effectiveness that's going on. So we have a lot of politicization that's going on here. If we can work together to try and address what is fact versus what is, I would say, political aspiration, I think we could really work together. And I would really say I'm committed to that, and I would argue that probably a number are.
Yeah, having worked in the legislature, around the legislature since I was 19 years old, I think the observation is, data makes a good report, anecdote makes a good bill. Good legislation, and that's how you get a bill passed. You get, my mom went to the grocery store and this is what happened to her, and damn it, this had happened to your mom too. So you're exactly right, but you got to be careful about data too. The dropout rate in Texas public schools has been talked about over and over and over again. And you would think that from the stories that you read in the newspaper, we were increasing the numbers of dropouts, when in fact, over the last 10 years, the attrition rate, worst way in the world you can look at dropouts, just number of 9th graders, 4 years later, how many graduates were you, has dropped from 40%, a horrible number, down to 29%. Still a horrible number, but significant progress has been made. And I would point out that attrition rate, the fallibility of it is this. I mentioned I had 2 high school seniors. My daughter is technically a junior, but she's accelerated enough that she's probably going to graduate early. She's a dropout under that definition because she wasn't part of the cohort 4 years later. So that, if you look at that data, they've got that same data. My daughter counts as a dropout if she graduates early. So you got to be careful about what data you're looking at.
This gentleman over here has been waiting patiently. And
Thank you.
There's a lady back here, so thank you.
Commissioner Paradis, you mentioned in your opening comments something that keeps me awake at night, and that is the preparation or lack of preparation of our teachers to deal with students of diversity. You mentioned Latino students, and I think that's a primary concern, but diversity, as we all know, is much larger. I find my colleagues in higher education to have very little passion about that issue, to be not very interested in tackling that issue. We also are aware of this sort of growing animosity in the general public on those kinds of issues. It seems to me that you are going to have to provide some leadership on that issue. We talk about it, we all read the demographics, we all are concerned, and then we all don't do anything about it. And I don't know how to generate the urgency that I think the issue demands. I think it is the most challenging issue ahead of us, economically, culturally, etc. Where does the leadership come to push us forward, and where does the accountability come to push us forward on that issue?
Well, our formula funding recommendations are designed precisely to address that issue. Our formula funding recommendations have 4 metrics. One of them is increasing the number of students who actually graduate from a university. They can be transfer students, but they can be native students, students who graduate from the university. We're going to count those. So we're placing more emphasis on success and trying to balance access and success. Secondly, we heard when we started rolling out our proposal that we heard particularly from regents, well, we'll just raise our admission standards, and as one regent said to me, he says, we won't admit any more poor Latino students. How do you like that, Commissioner Paredes? And so we put a metric in there to give institutions credit for graduating students who fit in at-risk categories. I don't like the designation very much, but it's commonly used. So those then our third metric is a predicted graduation rate, based on looking at the correlation between the number of Pell students that are on a given campus as opposed to the number, not Pell students on the campus, but Pell students in an entering class compared to the number of students that are in the top 10% of their high school graduating classes. And we've run a number of simulations and found out that that's a fairly reliable indicator of what a university will do in terms of overall graduation performance. So 3 of the 4 metrics that we're proposing be implemented address the issue that you just raised. Our position is we have a number of institutions in Texas that are virtually open admission. We applaud that. We applaud that we have universities that are committed to helping students from less than competitive backgrounds gain access to university with the intention of graduating. And we're saying, now we want you to help them more. And so we're going to fund you on the basis of how well you do in helping those students proceed to graduation.
And maybe I should have focused my question a little more on teacher preparation. I think those strategies are laudable in the general university population, but how do we get our collective attention in teacher preparation focused on the preparation of new teachers and the development of existing teachers to address these needs in the public school classroom?
Whenever you finish.
If I could step in here, one of the worst rear-end chewings I ever received in my entire life, I went back to my old high school. And I want to say this with respect to what you're saying. I understand you're saying looking at the needs of different individuals, different ethnic groups in our society. And I've got no problem with retention of ethnic identity. I think that there's been a historical struggle in our country about retention of ethnic identity versus assimilation into our culture. I think becoming a first-generation college graduate overcomes a lot of the negatives of poverty and expectations for future generations, so I would keep that as a goal. My only concern, and I got to this class and the teachers were basically saying, some kids can't learn. And they kept beating me up over requiring algebra in high school. I mean, algebra should not be required in high school. Algebra is not necessary for work in the field or digging ditches. Why are you requiring algebra for a high school diploma? And they kept hitting me over and over and over. And it finally came down to, okay, who are those kids that can't learn? And they were kids of color and kids living in poverty, and that was the wrong answer for me. Right. So that's what I don't want to see that get spun into a lower expectation. Right. And I don't mean to say that you were saying that, but I'm saying that's a fear that I see when you institutionalize.
I think we have the lower expectation. I'm trying to say what drives. We already have that down.
Oh, but we're trying to fight that.
What drives us to that higher expectation?
But we're trying to fight that by saying that, you know, career and technology, college readiness, and career readiness is the same as college readiness and an academic prep program. So that's where I come from, and just in how we address it, and retention of ethnic identity are absolutely fine principles. I just don't want to see it get twisted into something that we're trying to fight against.
If I could add something to that, because we live by this every day in P16, that is closing the gap. Many of us in this room have been in education 30 years plus. And having come from the world of teacher prep for 22 years, I think it's imperative on colleges of education, anyone who prepares an educator today, to help them understand that every child has the capacity to learn. It may be at different levels. We're not all going to be college graduates. We're not all going to have certificates. But somewhere when you look at the state and you look at closing the gap and you look at the population of this state, I think this is what pre-service teachers need to understand, that when you enter that classroom, you have an obligation to know who it is you are teaching, where they are, where you would like them to be in that 9 months that you have on their lives in order to help them achieve whatever they are capable of achieving. And I don't think that we as educators profess that enough, because we're not becoming teachers to make everybody a college graduate. What we are doing is helping them to be prepared to be able to make a choice, whatever that choice is, when they leave that 12th grade and then move forward. And that is the responsibility of why we are in higher ed, why we are preparing teachers, and why every student out there has the right to have that. And I think until we drill that message into why you're becoming a teacher, then you've got a missing link. Plus, I think the population of all faculty out in higher ed have to understand that it isn't just affecting pre-service, it's affecting every student that's coming out of the pipeline who wants to be an engineer, an accountant, a business person, because when we take them in, we are committing and should be committing to getting them to where they want to be. I mean, I just think, and that's what closing the gap is. The data is there. We know where we are in this state, and we've got 4 years in order to keep this continuum. And as the commissioner has stated, we are looking at that success factor. We're getting them in, but how can we keep them? Sure, they're coming to us with deficiencies, and they're not ready to teach math, to take math. They're not ready necessarily in English. But how do we remedy that? We can't expect that K-12 is going to correct it overnight. They're moving in that direction, but until that time comes, then we have got to come to the table and do what we need to do as educators with the skills that we have.
We've got 30 minutes left. We've got 2 actionable items as far as I can recall. One of them is that Robert and I are going to talk about how we can improve the opportunity for clinical experience for teachers in training. And the second one is we're going to do a demonstration of that educational effectiveness model that's being developed. So what else?
I've been uncharacteristically quiet, as you have been. Yeah, right. I want to respond to what you said about English language learners and our teachers in preparation. The folks who are with the schools of education, colleges of education, understand that there is a new accreditation system coming on board, and as part of that accreditation system, there is a survey that goes out to the employers And critical points of that survey deal with how well prepared that beginning teacher is to work with students who are English language learners, students with disabilities, technology. I think when the system gets in place, when it gets fine-tuned, when it's out there and everybody knows about it, those folks who've not been paying attention to our English language learners will have, there's a new day dawning. All the teachers in the state are getting training and will receive training on the new English language learner proficiency standards. Those are texts.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
People don't
I was hoping you would.
understand. They're texts. They're not just something that sits over here. They are integrated. That was a huge step that I'm sorry I'm preaching now, but that was a huge step that our state took about 3 or 4 years ago. If there's anything that we can be proud of, is that our state has exceptional English language proficiency standards. The challenge is that every one of our teachers, especially new teachers going in, need to understand what those mean, and the fact that the state will provide instructional materials that will, in every course, every subject, give that teacher strategies to work with kids at whatever language level they are in cosmetology, PE. And that's exceptional. I mean, those are the kinds of things that are going to take time to get us moving, but the potential for serving our students is just exceptional.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is an institutionalization of exactly the type of thing that I think you were talking about in public education, and that is part of our curriculum standards. Those English language proficiency standards are going to be an expectation throughout the entire process, throughout all subjects.
We're going to have to move on. I've got a person in brown, the lady in brown who's been waiting patiently, and then Dr. Simpson, and then we need to see if they're just and this lady in purple. We'll take those three, and then we'll see if there are any more actionable items. We can have good conversation, but I'm being pushed for some actionable items. So the person in brown, I can't see your name, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I don't know where my blue thing went. That's Kelly Coon. You started talking about, at the beginning of this second session, about what you see in schools and what you want to see in schools. Teachers in the education program, we spend a lot of time on best practice, and then we spend time on how do I make that work in the real world, because we go out there and it's not always what we want to see either. One of the things that would be helpful to us, like you told us about Project Share today, and Dr. Booker said we'd get that, I'd be happy to share that with my students and give them that. Something like C-Scope. I can't get that. So I can't prepare my students to see how to match that to the text when I can't get access to it as an institution of higher ed, so that I can show that to them before they get to that clinical piece where they need to know how to work around those parameters that the district's going to imply.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think that that's part of the goal of Project Share, is to make that stuff more readily available to everybody. So I want your students to have accounts and be able to get at that, and I can work with the regional service centers and the providers of C-Scope. You know, it's proprietary material and people make money on it, but this is a public service, and having that, they should want teachers to understand and know about it ahead of time, because what happens is when the critics of C-Scope come to me and say they don't like it, it's because it was forced upon them, and their principal might not be utilizing it as correctly as possible, and they feel like they're being, pinched in the system that they don't belong in. And so I think that an understanding of different types of scope and sequence out there would be very helpful.
It's true. I'm sorry, Grant, and then the lady in purple. The purple lady. Dr. Hale.
I hope that, is it on?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I hope that my comments lead to the actionable item. And I'd like to add my thanks for this very needed dialogue. The forces of accountability have been with us for 3 decades, as Judy pointed out, and everyone in this room supports accountability. And the hue and cry for clinical practice is something we also support, and it's not going to go away. Both of them require an enormously high degree of collaboration between higher ed and P12, and that needs more than rhetoric. It needs enablement, and that enablement comes in the form of policy and funding and ways that help us work together in ways that achieve the product. One of the things that I heard about just recently at a conference is in North Carolina, they have added to the report card of public schools workforce condition, and that contributes to their formula funding. If they get a poor rating in workforce condition, something has to happen. And it's that kind of shared accountability that I think is going to have to be developed for the high degree of collaboration that we would all welcome.
I agree with you, and I think Dr. Paredes and I, particularly in the college readiness process, were far more collaborative than any two commissioners that I've seen in my history in public service. And we have worked well in the P16 Council. We rotate as chair. My duty is up, and in January he'll assume the chair of that council for policy discussions and continued collaboration. There was, most interestingly, and Dr. Paredes and I both get calls about this by the press a lot these days, there was a bill filed to consolidate our two agencies and make us one entity. So one of us is going to lose our job if that bill passes. We've got to flip a coin to decide who gets to go and retire.
In all fairness, at least one.
At least one. But my response to that was, okay, I see what you're trying to do, but there are some serious governance issues. For instance, TEA has the State Board of Education, the State Board for Educator Certification, and the Council on Disabilities that are policy boards. So you would be adding a fourth, the coordinating board, and trying to determine which four of those policy entities had any control over a larger bureaucracy than the one you have today. So there's a lot to think through. I don't take positions on bills like that, but I just say that there's a lot to think about in a discussion like that. Could there be a positive outcome of more interaction? Absolutely. And I think Dr. Paredes and I would gladly concede that, yeah, we want to work more closely together, which is why we're here today, and why we regularly meet. And, you know, until recently, we traveled to Washington together. I guess we need to do that more. I was in Washington this week. But we would go meet our delegation together, and they would say, we've never seen the Commissioner of Ed and the Commissioner of Higher Ed together before. So I think we've worked together very well. How we institutionalize that for the future is, I think, the big question.
Dr. Hale.
I want to just make a comment about college and career readiness. That program and the small grants that came to institutions. I'm a recovering dean of arts and science.
Okay.
And I'm the interim dean of the School of Education. So I'll let you figure that out. I haven't figured it out yet. But so I was very much involved. I was the special advisor on my campus for college and career readiness. And my husband sat on the math statewide vertical team. It did more. That $15,000 plus another $15,000 did more to get my institution and the local community colleges and the public schools to work together than any other single thing. Now, what I want is a continuation of the funding. That's what I want. My problem right now is all the funding is in a place 5 hours away because we centralize it in regions, and I'm west of I-35. More jackrabbits than people. And so my access to those funds now is pretty limited. We had 2,000 high school sophomore kids on our campus to take Accuplacer, do diagnostics in maths, do some, come visit the university kinds of things. And the two community colleges and the university worked together to pull that off. We got no money, of course, because it was direct service to students. Okay, I'd like you to go back to the drawing board on college and career readiness and make sure this thing doesn't die. Because for me and my institution, those funds supported, incredible vertical team efforts in math and English language arts, and now we want to do science, and now we want to do social studies, and we, in this economic environment, just really need coordinating board support for that. That's my plea. A great,
thank you.
Great thing.
I have some concrete ideas.
Okay, good.
All right. Number one, if we want to know whether we're dealing with phonemic awareness, have the TEA program review process focus on that. One observation, our resistance to the National Center for Teacher Quality was that they did a paper review. They didn't come down and talk to teachers, and and in our case, it was one more demand on accountability data while we were dealing with SACS and NCATE and everybody else. But
didn't you get when we invited you to this meeting? Didn't you get that notice that we wouldn't talk about that report?
No, I'm not talking about that report. I'm talking about the report about my institution, okay? So TEA program review can get at whether phonemic awareness is being dealt with.
We'll be on that.
Okay, second, this is maybe a trivial thing, but we have reason to believe we'd have more applicants for our elementary teacher program if we didn't have to call it interdisciplinary studies. We get more and more feedback from students who say, I was interested in teaching, but I thought that was a liberal arts degree. I couldn't figure out why it'd be in a college of education. I don't know if this is legislation or TEA rule, but if we could call teacher preparation once and for all.
That's a no-brainer.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
We're still forced to call it something other than.
As long as that's a consensus around the room, I'll be happy to do it.
Okay.
We'll fix that.
A third observation, the coordinating board is now producing, when y'all came, Commissioner, to the regions, you brought with you, I think David presented it, this 7th grade pipeline.
Right.
One observation is we're overwhelmed with data. They all matter, TEA numbers and all that sort of thing. But that we have found in our P16 work to be the single most effective graphic, which has, what it does is follow a cohort of 7th graders and say, when it's all said and done, how many have a certificate, a 2-year or 4-year degree in a reasonable amount of time. And in the Gulf South, it's 19 out of 100. That gets folks' attention. So my appeal, keep that data point in your research and in your publishing. While we're issuing a whole flow of data, cradle to career, that's the one kind of metric that makes the most sense to people. I don't know if this is something we can keep track of, but we've got a lot of institutions in the state now replicating UTeach. Right? We started with UTD and University of Houston, and then North Texas, Arlington, I believe, right? And I'm probably leaving others out. One of our we are in the institute tracking our numbers, but here's an incidental number to the math and science issue. And A&M has, I'm sorry, there is something other than UTeach in the world, right?
Yes, there is. I wanted you to know that, but that's okay. That's all right.
But the remarkable thing, right, is that we actually ask people, ever thought about teaching, and they go, yeah, but mostly we ask them too late. And in these replications in A&M's program, we ask them early on. Here's my observation. We're finding that a significant number of students majoring in math and science, when they get introduced to early teaching, which is in their freshman first semester, and also say, I'm struggling a little with the whole major, can easily be talked into middle school math and science teaching. And I think our numbers have gone up by 50%, totally attributable to the spillover from Teach Houston Secondary into our middle school program. So I'm suggesting if we just monitor that, maybe we could create a consortium, somehow, maybe the deans of education should be doing this.
We'll get more data on from the University of Houston on that, and then we'll circulate that information among all of you so that you might want to replicate from College Station.
I mean, there may be phenomena like these that simply aren't on our radar screen that would be very useful. And then this isn't a concrete recommendation, but an observation. You and I were on the Sid Richardson panel on teacher education in the university, right? And one of our presenters was the Teach for America regional head in the Valley. After his presentation, and we learned what they do about following teachers into the classroom and dealing with work product and asking the question, what's your part in what's coming out of the classroom? One of our panel said, how much does Teach for America put behind each of your core members each year, over and above whatever the school district does? The answer was $30,000. Okay? That's not to say we can't do a lot of what they're doing, but when we talk about Teach for America, we should really also acknowledge the extraordinary...
Just remember, I think the main point that Robert and I were making about Teach for America not that it's the magic bullet, but rather that the one thing that I thought was most apropos is that it is possible to attract high-achieving college students into teaching for whatever period of time. That was
Let
my
me
own-
suggest, here's the problem, with all due respect. The casual comments, I'll call them, about Teach for America almost inevitably mean that would be an alternative to our colleges of education that would save the world.
No.
I know you don't mean that, but unless you say, here's the context for my comment, the public reads it that way, and we are under enormous pressure without the full knowledge of all the circumstances. So I think it's not always possible. Same thing with alternative certification. You don't mean to truncate what you're saying, but what's not said is filled with interpretation, and it is almost always so. The single source problem we have is colleges of education.
Well, I accept it. I accept the criticism, if not rebuke, and I will modify my comments accordingly.
That's why I brought up the waiting for Superman analogy earlier, because the oversimplification of the complexities that we face is detrimental to a good dialogue. What I like about Teach for America is that the prestige that the profession should hold has taken hold in that program. And when I walk into a classroom, unknowing as to what the Ed Prep program, there are some days I can walk in and see a teacher and walk over to the principal and go, Teach for America, right? Because they're hitting it. I mean, they're just working it with the kids. And I have seen an energy and an enthusiasm that they've been able to instill in some of their active members that I want to duplicate in all Ed Prep programs. That's what I draw from them, is that they are able to impassion young educators that are bright and energetic, and gosh, we ought to replicate that. We ought to figure out how their selection process identifies those qualities and perpetuates those qualities in teachers.
Sorry, Susan, last comment. There's a fair amount of variability within Teach for America. I worked with them in New Orleans before I came to Houston, and we work with them in Houston. So there's some variability. They aren't all the kind of...
Not all, but I've seen that spark so many times.
But again, generalizing means that's the answer. Right?
Okay, so
the other thing is any comments that you and the other commissioner can make in this regard, which is to tell more of the picture, will be listened to very carefully. Anytime we talk about it, we're simply being defensive.
I can't speak for Robert, but I'll follow your advice.
I appreciate what you say. I'm just trying to figure out how to make the whole system work as well as the best of their best too. I mean, and it's just like when we compare SAT scores from Texas, our best compared to their best, very comparably. So you look at Iowa that tests maybe 5% of their population versus 55% of ours, and they're very high and we're very low, and no one takes into account what the College Board tells you is that you have to take into consideration the percentage of students tested and the economic status of those students when making a valid national comparison. So I hear what you're saying, and I think that we do that all the time in education. We say something because we see something we like, and it gets overgeneralized.
2 folks are waiting to comment. Now 3, it looks like. We have just a few minutes. Dr. Kroc had his hand up, and then Dr.
Seidman.
I can't read it. Thank you. And then back over here.
Commissioner Scott and Commissioner Paredes, thank you so much for today. I think this has been one of the greatest interchanges I think I've had in 35 years in Texas. Super. Actionable item that affects all of us, not just teacher preparation, every major in the university. And that is dual enrollment. This promised to be a beautiful baby. And it was. But it's grown another head. And what we are finding at Texas A&M across the university is that we have young folks coming to Texas A&M with 40 and 50 and 60 hours of college credit. And mommies and daddies are saying, whoa! I have saved 2 years of tuition and fees at Texas A&M University. And we find those young folks there 4 years later, going across the stage in graduation. So they really spent 6 years in higher education. What happens on that is that it seems that a lot of high school students are enrolling in the dual enrollment courses just because they happen to be convenient. So rather than follow a core curriculum or a curriculum that's driven by a particular major that they see out there, they're simply taking courses, and I think sometimes assuming that all of them are going to apply. I don't know exactly what needs to be done. We've tried at Texas A&M to invite in community college counselors, run training sessions, seminars, and that sort of thing, but we found out that they have a big problem and that they can't control their students' registration. But I think some sort of support by rule, by policy, could help us narrow that field a little bit and make sure that more of those dual enrollment courses work and count toward degree.
This falls under the funny you should ask category.
We talked about it before this meeting, actually. Let me ask McGregor to address this issue in a broader context. We're very much aware of this issue.
And I think David mentioned earlier, if it was in this meeting, I think it was, talking about adding the learning objectives and learning outcomes to the core curriculum courses and those in the ACGM. One of the things that we're looking at doing is, as we're adding those learning outcomes to the courses, requiring that dual credit courses, any dual credit courses that are offered, come from within the courses for which learning outcomes have already been developed. And that as we're expanding that, our focus is going to be primarily on core curriculum courses, beginning with those that are most highly used, like 1301 and 1302 and 2301 and 2302 and calculus and those type of courses, so that we are narrowing down, hopefully, the focus of those the dual credit classes. Now, part of the challenge we get into is with the early college high schools, which is where you're seeing the predominance of those kind of programs, Jim, that where students are coming in with 40 to 60 hours and some of them even with an associate's degree, and they really are getting an associate's degree. And if they go from an associate's degree in whatever general field they're looking at and decide to go into engineering, they're going to lose 30 hours of their credit, not in terms of being accepted at the institution, but in terms of being accepted to the degree. We're working not only with the Undergraduate Education Advisory Committee, of which members of your faculties are involved, but also with the legislature to look at ways that we can improve that and to improve the rigor and the content of dual credit, and also to ensure that students and their parents are educated, as well as the faculty and counselors at the high school level and at the 4-year and 2-year institution level, so that students are made fully aware that, yes, you may get 60 hours of college credit in an early college high school program, but depending upon the major, you may still require an additional 90 hours for you to complete your degree.
And that is so important, because the feedback I'm getting, our parents are graduating with those 60 hours and they're going, woo! And then they get to the college and they go, they only took 12. Woo! And they're coming to us saying, you sold us a bill of goods.
Yeah.
You know?
Another piece as well is that there are really 3 types of dual credit. Parents aren't told this. I know that McGregor's talked with some of our colleagues at TEA about this. Is you have the dual credit, which is probably what you're talking about, which is intended to transfer to all schools in Texas. You have dual credit for technical courses, which are only intended to go to community colleges, and you have the accelerated programs, which are really links directly between one high school and one college. Articulated credit. And the parents, we've discovered, are not typically told that. And it's an important thing to distinguish, because they take them very different routes. But I think the important thing is, and you should know that, because of some instances that we learned about specifically at Texas A&M, it was part of the impetus for our creating the mechanical engineering effort. And because we did understand there were a number of students who came to that campus, and we found others with an associate degree in areas where they intended to major in engineering, but they did not take any math courses that any engineering school in the country would count as mathematics. So And I have to say that A&M took all the courses that were, there's field of study guides, as you know, and A&M took every course that was in the field of study guide. But unfortunately, a year's worth of courses were not included, and a particular community college had not followed that guide. So there are a number of problems, but we've got about 6 different things related that we think will help.
We're going to put in our rules a stipulation that students have to be advised about the transferability of dual credit courses to particular institutions, and that they be informed that some they may count for general education, but may not count towards a specific.
And I mentioned to the commissioner, I don't know if he agrees with this, but it occurs to me that we probably, if they really are taking that many hours, they probably need to have a degree plan in place when they're in high school. If they reach the point of 30 hours, that they can't just accumulate credits.
Yeah, but that presents problems, though, because if you're locked into that degree plan and you can't make, I mean, once you go as a freshman, you really shouldn't be changing the degree requirements, and that puts it over 6 years potentially. And
no, if you have a degree plan in place, it would mean
4 years?
It would be for 4 years. So they would know exactly how it would apply, and if they take those additional 12 hours, it would in fact be hours that wouldn't count.
Okay.
Would be the intent of it.
Folks,
defeat that.
Yeah, we're about to.
The commissioner has asked me to wrap this up. If you have comments, questions that you would like to share individually, I would appreciate that. Number one, I want to say thank you so much for coming, for the lively discussion. I do apologize that not everybody got to say everything they wanted. We will promise that this will not be your only opportunity. Looks like we have one person who wants to give us the benediction.
One more thing for your policy actionable items. There are a lot of students that enter our schools at the high school level. They're about 14, 15 years old. They speak no English. Spanish-speaking kids, they are legal. There's no way that they can achieve to their limit without having a teacher that's certified in bilingual education. But there is no K-12 all-level certificate or EC-12 all-level bilingual supplement. All-level bilingual.
Thank you. That one's taken care of.
Man, you guys are fast.
Thank you, Inspector.
We will be actively recruiting them from across the country.
Cheryl, I suggest you walk over here and have a discussion.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.